Our conversation today is with Chris James and Ed Bonawitz. These two seemingly ordinary guys are some of the best shooters I've run across. Something fascinates me about how these two guys, out of all the people I've met and shot with, ended up being the best. So I attempted to drill into their backstory, how they see shooting, how they perceive training, the media, the firearms industry, competition shooting, weapons selection, optics, and much more. We ultimately ran out of time, and I feel like I'm going to have them come back because there's a lot more ground I wanted to cover. But for now, please meet two extraordinary citizens of Texas, Chris James and Ed Bonawitz. It's good to see you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah, great.
And what, 5-6 days?
Friday.
It's been a week.
Yeah.
It has been a week.
Not even a full week. But I like hanging out with you guys, so it's never enough time. Never enough time.
This is true.
Yeah.
So it probably is just good to start with who you guys are. Like, who the hell are you guys?
Sure.
You're just two guys off the street.
Just two guys.
Pretty much.
And from my audience's perspective, you really are. So no one's going to know who you are.
Thank
No,
God.
at all. Yeah.
Let's keep it that way.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start with I don't
Ed.
know.
Let's do it,
Okay,
Ed.
we're going to start
Sure.
with Ed. Why don't you start? Like, what's your name and background? And
Sure. Well, my name's Ed Bonawitz. I've been living in Central Texas for about 30 years, but I originate from Pennsylvania. Ex-military, moved to Texas with the military and landed into a job which I've now been with for 27 years.
have you really?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, it's a major telecommunications company, and I basically do shadow IT work within the company, specifically focused around a not well-known discipline called workforce management, which is really boring to most people. It's like scheduling, attendance management, payroll, and sort of HR-related functions.
They're kind of important things.
Yeah.
They're super important.
Keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, as I've often said, it's kind of like a sewage manager job, right?
Okay.
Nobody really cares about what I do until it's broken. Right? So then I'm the most important person in the world. Yeah. So, but I enjoy it. I've become extremely specialized in it, and it's a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunity to save the company money. So it's a big company I work for. So
You've heard of it.
everyone's heard of it.
Awesome. So Chris James, and I'm a native Texan, grew up in El Paso in the west of Texas in the desert, and stayed out in the desert, went to school, University of Arizona, studied all things IT and database, and then promptly didn't do any of that and went into web development when the web was still new-ish, at least new to me, and sort of got, kind of went around everywhere, was in the Bay for a little bit, working for a couple of software companies. And in 2005, came back here to Austin and started working for Dell. And right at that moment, this social media thing kind of happened in the zeitgeist, I guess. And so I kind of glommed onto that, having a little bit of a web background, mostly like a web technology and analytics background. What I found very quickly was I was able to translate how to use all this stuff to a bunch of marketers and communicators and lawyers who were basically terrified of it. And so I found this great niche where if I helped those people maybe find a path to do this and either stroke their executive ego on Twitter or build a digital marketing practice or an advertising function, it worked. And so I played around with that for really the last 16, 17 years with more companies than I can list in just about every sector. I've been in the wine industry and retail and back here at tech. And I work for a really big tech company that people have also heard of. And essentially, doing the communication side of it and PR and where all that kind of blends back together. So a little bit full circle for me, but it's been in Austin the second time around since 2015.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think we all have in common as we talk about, this is mostly a conversation about firearms and being citizen, carrying individuals. We all have something in common where we all were introduced to guns pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
We all took a pretty big chunk of time off We're like, we just didn't really
absolutely.
do it and think about it. It wasn't really part of our day-to-day thinking or whatever. And then we all at some point started taking it really much more seriously.
Yeah.
And so I'd kind of like to talk about that arc a little bit. I know, Ed, you've got kind of more of a W. So
yeah.
maybe we start with you.
Yeah.
Sure. If I put it in the simplest terms, but I probably won't because I am a little long-winded, but I'm known for that. Sorry, folks. But ultimately, I'll just say this. I grew up in a house, like I said earlier, up in central Pennsylvania. They call it the Pennsylvania T. A lot of people have never heard of that, but it's the top strip and the center strip of Pennsylvania, which is more like the conservative areas. So I grew up there.
The not Philadelphia and Pittsburgh part, basically.
Pretty much, right. Exactly. So, but in those areas, they have a lot of guns, and it's a more sort of conservative culture. And my father had a lot of firearms, and I grew up around those. And I believe that he was some kind of a gun dealer with a federal firearms license. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I have this memory where back in the 80s, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years old, and he's like, go to the pickup truck and get the Uzi, right? I don't remember much else about it, but
do you know where it was?
I remember it was in the winter and it was snowy, and because I guess he didn't want to go out or whatever, and I just remember going out and getting it out of the car, out of this blue Chevy pickup truck, and I'm walking back to the house. It's a small neighborhood with like an Uzi sort of over my shoulder. It's just it was a long barrel Uzi, but I don't know why, but I just remember that growing up with that.
That's pretty formative. That's
yeah, it's that moment in time that's sort of trapped in your memory. But other than that, I didn't really shoot a lot. I remember my father taking me out, and if he ever listens to this podcast, he's going to be really embarrassed. But I doubt he will. But he took me out to the gun range and had a 308 rifle, bolt action rifle, and he just let me shoot it without any instruction.
Oh. Interesting.
And naturally,
that
I want to say 8 or 9.
Okay.
So that's a heck of a firearm for an 8 or 9 year old.
It sure is.
It'll
push you around.
I put the stock in the center of my chest, and I was sitting on the bench holding it kind of like this, right, looking through the scope, and I fired it, and it knocked me off the table.
I bet
the rifle went up into the air, and he said, and again I'm going to embarrass him here, but he said, I said, did I hit it? And I was kind of upset by it all, and he said, no, you shot it over the thing, and it's probably went into the next town and shot some baby in the neck. and I was like mortified, right?
Thanks, Dad.
Because I'm literally imagining this bullet sailing into somebody's house, right?
Yeah.
But no formal firearms instruction. My dad was, a decent shot, and he's a great guy. So I'm not really besmirching him, but I guess he thought it was funny at the time, and in hindsight, it is funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of where the extent of my firearms was, just basically kind of dabbling and playing around with guns and being exposed to them, but really no kind of actual education.
But then you went to the military.
Yeah. So 18 years old, joined the military, the U.S. Army, was in military intelligence in that as well, and it was really cool
Isn't that
career.
An oxymoron? Isn't that?
Yeah, that's what they like to say, right? But it was a great opportunity. One I definitely don't regret. I opted to do that over college, at that time, and I thought at the time, I played video games in the 80s, and I had pretty good hand-eye coordination and shooting games and things like that, and so I thought I was pretty good with firearms, and the military told me that I was too. Right?
Good affirmative culture there as well.
Right. I got my expert rifleman badge, and I carried a pistol and learned, no training at all with the pistol. Went out there and did really great at that too. Watched some of the other officers shooting and watched them pass as well. Some did well, some not so well. But, I really believed that I, was pretty skilled with firearms. Mm-hmm. And the nature of my job, of course, was not heavily firearms centric in the military.
Yeah.
But it is always interesting to me how people believe that, if you were in the military,
it's a gun
you're
culture.
Good with guns.
Right. It's not.
Right. Same thing with police. Right. some are amazing, and some of my experiences with them, that they're truly fantastic, and others, not so much.
We'll get to besmirching other groups.
No, I'm not besmirching. Just just a very broad array of skill, right?
Yeah.
So, but then, do you want me to continue from there?
No, let's talk about the backstories first.
Sure.
Then we'll get to modern day.
Yeah, I've got a dad Uzi story too.
I love it.
Yeah, also with the long barrel.
Yeah.
I have mine's random. It's everything that should have been a cool, nice linear story that wasn't. And largely that was due because my parents got divorced when I was really little, and they are very different people. But my mom grew up on a farm in the Panhandle, and my grandparents were a lot older. She was the youngest, and they had always just, I think grown up in a pretty wild place. I mean, Panhandle in the 20s and 30s was barely settled, and harsh and difficult. And they were not wealthy. So what they had, in terms of firearms, they passed down. And it was a really big deal to make sure that this El Paso kid for, my mom's son was trained properly. And so it was my grandfather that first kind of put a rifle into my hands. And much like you had, I spent a little bit more time with a lot more instruction in the backyard on a tree stump from about 6 years to 8 years. Whenever I visited, all I could do was cycle the bolt and dry fire. I wasn't allowed to touch any ammo, wasn't allowed to go shoot.
That's cool.
And then finally, I think about 9 years old, we went out to the farm, and he was a consummate smoker, my grandfather, pulled out big Folgers can. He said, fill it full of dirt, walk out there a little bit, and then let's go and shoot it. And I did that for years. And eventually my mom kind of got to a place in her life in El Paso where she started to worry, being a single mom. And, so she got a handgun, and I remember going out to the desert and shooting her 38 for the first time and being like, wow, pistols suck. Like, this isn't fun. This is hard. Like, let's go back to the rifle. And her boyfriend at 12 gave me a Ruger 1022, and that was like my first gun. But I could never really go out and shoot it much because my dad, on the other hand, could give two shits. He really could. His father was in the Air Force. He moved all around everywhere. But the one thing they didn't really have in the house, or need to have, I guess, from their perspective, was firearms. Mm-hmm. And so my dad had firearms, but largely only because of his business as a West Texas bankruptcy lawyer. So he'd get them in lieu of payment, like he would really cool cars and airplanes and stuff like that. So we were much more like, Dad and I were airplane and car guys. And he would randomly say, you want to come into the walk-in safe that's practically empty and get that thing off the shelf, Chris. Let's sit down here and ogle this Uzi. But ogle from the perspective of, I don't think either of us know how to use it, what it does, and no intention whatsoever to shoot. Never saw it shot.
Oh, just as a valuable,
it was maybe a talisman in his mind.
Sure.
He had these. He was so foolish and let me. Sorry, Dad. Let me play with these beautiful shotguns in high school. These 20 gauge, like hand filigreed shotguns that he'd been gifted from a client that were worth several thousands of dollars. And I just went out and beat him up doing like dove hunting and shooting rabbits and stuff in the middle of New Mexico. And so that was my kind of introduction. And it didn't really stick. I had the gun, but I didn't really think about it. I didn't make any plans on it. I went off to college. I got into IT. I wasn't around anybody else who was interested in guns whatsoever for almost two decades. And it wasn't until I came back to Texas in 2006 that I had this coworker who's like, yeah, I build AR-15s. I'm like, you're allowed? Tell me more. This is interesting. Went out, shot a little bit, and I'm hooked. Mainly because ARs are like building PCs, which I've done all my life, and it's like, ooh, give me some. Let's put this together, and now let's change this part out. Let's soup it up. So long before I cared about marksmanship or really even serious self-defense, I was absolutely kind of hooked as a builder, and so I had the token AR.
Yeah, sure.
And I've always gravitated towards mil spec and being a tactical Tommy. And so I didn't want anything else unless it was like what the guys in the GWAT were carrying. And I had very little, connection with that. When I was trying to get into the military, it was the Navy. All I wanted to do was fly. I became a pilot at 23. So I prioritized a lot of, maybe heavier caliber skills before I got into small arms. And, but from that point forward, I was kind of hooked, but really still didn't know how to shoot more. Wanted to, but couldn't. I had my buddy who built, but he actually kind of was more like, I like building ARs and trading and selling. And, he wasn't one to like get into firing them well or grading himself. And so that was sort of how it went. I moved around the country a little bit more, ended up in California where I had to put all these weird things on the AR to not go to jail. And, it very clearly like started to where, okay, well, this is great that I have this thing, but I really don't feel protected by it most of the time because I can't take it anywhere. I can't, it's encumbering. So, I started doing a lot of backpacking and being outside a lot, being away from vehicles and any kind of protective structures. And now was sort of what then kind of led me up. Okay, I've got a gap here. Maybe I should, look elsewhere.
Well, when you mentioned the AR and sort of the nerd factor, right?
Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
It's what it feels like to me too, right? So, I remember, kind of similarly, some of my first firearms that I purchased post-military or in the military were less about how does the gun work, what are its qualities, what is it capable of, and more like what I was familiar with, and sort of tokens of being in the military.
Right.
There was I think the P85, I believe, was one of my first pistols that I purchased because it was the Marine carry gun, and I couldn't find a 92F, which was the M9, of course.
Yeah, nobody could find that. It was like super hard
Almost
to find. Lifetime
Absolutely,
of the gun
yeah. But that's the one I wanted because I was great at it. And I, for effect there, I was great at it. Little did I know I wasn't. But the same thing with the AR. The first AR that I purchased was in a Walmart parking lot out of a trunk. It was legal.
Seems legit, yeah.
But that's Texas, right? So, but ultimately it was for the same thing. It was during the Obama era. The rush to grab your guns.
Yes, I'm aware of this.
Right?
Yes.
And
43-cent 5.56 ammo. I recall very strongly in 2008.
And though you may find it ironic, I was an Obama supporter. I thought he was pretty cool.
That's actually something that's kind of interesting. I don't think any of us really share politics very well. Like we're kind of all kind of a mismatch.
I've worked for the Democratic Party in El Paso for years, helping my stepmom get elected. And by the way, she was a federal criminal judge, put a bunch of people away to send them to Huntsville to die. And lady will not touch a gun. She's just used to being protected by a bunch of people around her with guns.
Of course.
But I mean, that was kind of a thing. Between the nerd factor kind of pulling me in, but also not really, becoming at that time aware of maybe what I'm losing or that, gosh, I better enjoy this before it's gone, kind of with the assumption that, they're going to yank this thing like it's done.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. The AR was, I really liked that. I always wanted it. And then there was a time when I didn't make enough money to really afford one. I just remember feeling that pinch during the Obama era where everyone was raiding the ammo and stockpiling everything. And I wasn't even really intimately familiar because I wasn't focused on firearms. It was more just get one, right? And so you see that still to this date. Every time there's a scare, sort of people just going out and getting one, right?
Well, and I think because I was surrounded by politics growing up, I've never equated being from one particular ideology and that not having a basic need to defend oneself. Like it never really occurred to me, but it was always confusing when people started to draw hard lines around that, when it became a party issue,
Right.
in the 90s, and then again after the AWB was repealed in the early 2000s, it was clear that there were some people who were pissed off, but it didn't equate that, oh, this is an entire culture or subculture or on either side, depending on your perspective. And I still to this day don't think it has anything to do with politics.
I agree.
And I'm a if you need a label, I'm a centrist. I'll vote for whoever the hell I want.
Same.
And I try to not vote for assholes.
Yeah.
If you're going to take my shit away, you're probably not going to get my vote now. I think at this point, it's safe to say that there's no good reasons. And so, I think I end up being fairly critical or wanting to know what they practically can do. But I've had just as many Republicans screw with my rights as I have Democrats at this point. So
so true.
I don't need to fall into that convenient trope or path to kind of connect with someone like you.
So,
or him.
So that's interesting because I actually assumed you were more left. You were a little more right, and I was more center. But it's funny. I think we all ended up being pretty centrist.
I'm pretty centrist. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. So that's new information for me. Okay. So you both kind of went through some phase. I too had an early phase where I was on a ranch. It made a lot of sense to have a gun. And, shooting squirrels and rabbit animals and stuff. But like you, I was not properly trained. I mean, I knew how to shoot it. I knew how to clean it. I knew the basics, but not like now. Like this is a whole other level that we're at these days.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, other than some very basic where the barrel goes instruction, what else was there to know?
I mean, and safety, right? There was a lot of safety. I took a safety course in California. You had to have one.
This is true. Yes.
So I took a safety course. And so, I mean, I wouldn't say I had no training, but by today's standards, it was very, very minimal.
Yeah.
But just like you guys, something happened, right? There was some movement that suddenly made you start training for real.
Yep.
So what was that for you guys?
Oh, well, when was it for you? What year? Can you kind of pinpoint it?
Oh yeah, 2017.
It's 2017 for me
specifically. So there was there's a range here in Austin. It's a pretty nice range called the Range at Austin. They were built.
I've had Grant Shaw on the podcast, as a matter of fact.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's a great location. I don't remember how I heard about it being built, but it wasn't far from where I lived. I had some interest in shooting, and I had more income to afford it. And I remember the emails that I was receiving, and I started to follow it, and they eventually opened. I was one of their first members. I believe it was, I don't know, the very first day or second day that they opened, I was there. And I, like many people, would go to the range, and I bought a additional gun or two, and would shoot like I always did, thinking I was really good. Right. And at one point, I think maybe a year into them opening, maybe 6-8 months, I don't know, there was an email that I got from the Range at Austin that talked about this gunfighter club. And I'm a major pivotal person in my firearms experience. Jeff Gonzalez, who I know you've had on before, was the director at the Range at Austin of the training department, and it was this thing to a subscription where you could learn from him. And
super cool, by the way.
Right, and you could.
Yeah, but why? Why do it?
Well, I'll be honest. I thought it was really good.
So you thought you would breeze through it?
So I thought I would take it, and it would be a better way for me to like engage with the firearm and learn something, because there was something deep down inside of me that didn't really know what to do. So many people, even today, when I go to a gun range and you watch people, and this is a bit of an assumption, but you watch them shoot, and there's no plan.
Yeah, there's no intentionality.
They're just loading a mag, pointing it at a target, usually pretty close, and mag dumping into it, and then doing it again. I had been doing that for months at the range and was running out of ideas and perhaps even starting to get bored with it.
Yep.
And so I think it was just the right place at the right time. This idea that I would be able to come in and do training.
So you just fell right into it. Interesting.
I really did. And of course, I have a good story about how I almost jumped off that wagon, but which I guess I can go into.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So I went into Jeff's first class. I think you were there, right?
If not that one, one
No, I was
of
gonna
the
say, I
near
think
very soon, right?
Very early.
We've all been at least one 2017 class together, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, it was a screaming
pistol,
deal. The Gunfighter Club was a screaming deal. Basically, you got 2 days of training per month at roughly the cost of about 50% off if you were to sign up for the classes yourself. And I thought, what a great deal. So I signed up immediately. Probably one of the very first people in his club too. Went in there. We had a class of 8. I don't think there were any other gunfighters, in that club, but they were other just people who had signed on. And I thought, I'm going to be good, right? Showed up with I don't even remember firearm what it was. It was trash. Actually, it was the Beretta 92F.
Yeah.
It was one I had acquired, and I was awful. I mean, abysmal. 7-yard target. I'm putting shots off paper, down below the leg, I'm shooting left-handed because I'm a lefty at that, and I was at that time. That's changed, but either way, I just remember there was this young lady next to me, and this wasn't any kind of. She had no experience either. Right. So I remember her being very unfamiliar through the process of the training. So it was quite clear she had no firearms experience. And I looked like
better than
an
you.
absolute fool compared to her.
Yeah.
And this was my ego just shattering glass, on the floor.
Well, you're a little bit of a certification whore too, like me. There's a lot of things you've done in the past too that you're like, I want to rank up. Like
I like levels and
thing.
measures.
Yeah.
I do, right? Those are appealing to me and benchmarking, right? I'm very detail and numbers-oriented kind of person.
Yep.
But I just remember just doing so awful. I muscled through the whole class, but the entire day I felt destroyed. And I went out into the parking lot because it was a 2-day class. I think I've told you this story before, maybe.
No, I don't think so.
I went out and I had a dear friend who lived in another state that I confided in a lot, and I called her, and I was kind of pouting, right? A little bit, crying and teary-eyed or whatever, because I was just shattered by this. And she's a real matter-of-fact person. I told her my story, said I was thinking about not going back the next day. She basically said to me, you got 2 choices. You can suck it up, stop being a baby, or be a quitter.
Oof.
Right?
Truth bomb.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was a hard truth bomb.
Yeah.
And I decided I would not be a quitter. And that was a pivotal moment in my firearms life.
What was the reason you said yes? You could have quit. You should have quit. That was horrible. I mean, you were humiliated. Everything in your body's like, stop.
Because
So
I'm a
why didn't you?
contrarian by nature.
So yeah, okay.
I am. If someone says I can't do it, then by God I will.
Best motivation ever.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I respected her opinion of me, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I didn't want to be a quitter to her.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think I have a quintessentially modern journey to the gun. Like most males with computing technology between 1995 and present day, I played a lot of first-person shooters.
I'm a duck hunt in the 80s. Does that count?
Yes, I also played duck hunt. Was just as bad at that. Now I'm putting that together and be like, oh shit, yeah, I was really bad then too. And kind of had this expectation that because I yanked the trigger on the AR, like anything with a trigger, I'm blessed, right? Mm-hmm. And to the point where I don't even know that I really need to pick it up. It's assured. I also found out about the range. I mean, I had been doing enough shooting on the AR at this point where, like, I'd been to Best of the West. I'd been to other facilities in the area, mostly trying to get outside. I just liked being outside and shooting. Indoor ranges were never super exciting to me. But I had kind of an embarrassing kind of pistol moment with my brother-in-law. He brought his cool pistols up. He had an HK and a couple of other things, and he had a 40 and a 45, and I loaded a 40 into the 45 and discharged it, which isn't that big of a deal, but a lot worse if I had tried to do it the other way around.
It'll work.
It'll go bang.
Once.
Once. Right. Does not cycle, turns out.
No.
And it was just, it was a little bit embarrassing. I mean, a lot embarrassing, but for someone who claimed to have knowledge. And so I go out, and I had to borrow one of his pistols to go get my LTC. I was also embarrassed because one of my like kind of liberal campy friends he and his girlfriend decided to go get license to carry, and I was like, well I should come too. I like, how come how come you're not carrying, dude? You're back in you've been in Texas like 2 years. What are you doing? So went to LTC, and I got a great book recommendation that helped me begin the mindset part. And the mindset part was important because when I got to the class, Jeff's class, and did exactly the same thing you did, utterly shit the bed. What I needed was something to kind of pull me back, but I at that point had a little bit like there's an amazing book called The Gift of Fear that I would highly recommend. Has nothing to do with firearms, but it's probably one of the best, most important pieces of understanding why
The Gift of
Fear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish it's Martin somebody is the author, would highly recommend it if you're on any kind of journey about reflecting on your responsibility to protect yourself so that you don't have to be a drain on the resources of society to be protected.
Cool.
Anyway, so I borrow this gun, I do my LTC, I do pretty darn good. I'm like, maybe
The LTC.
Yeah, I did the very simple LTC shooting test of 50 rounds. And
You're amazing.
Like, man, I'm glad I'm good at this. I should get in some classes. I think Gunfighter Club sounds pretty cool. Let me get into that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I promptly show up, this time having bought a pistol probably the week before.
Nice.
And I think I put 50 rounds through it before the class.
Nice break-in period.
At least it worked.
And somehow managed to cobble together the 750 rounds we needed for 2 days. And go in and shoot this class. And obviously Jeff was like electric. I mean, and I say that in the sense of all of a sudden I was getting information. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, just like a lot of other people who are probably starting on out. Yeah. As like, of course I'm going to learn. I'm going to go to U.S. Sporting Federation and see how to do pistol things but no, now I'm getting like legit mindset. I'm getting legit, threat information, stuff that I wasn't expecting to get in a normal shooting course, but absolutely is critical in a defensive course. And this was the big unlock that I had not really been looking at or addressing defense in a intelligent way. And I consider myself intelligent. So this was a big gap. Then I go in and I absolutely suck it up, single-digit percentage. And by the way, I'm graded now. This is the first time I'm ever graded on my shooting besides pass-fail. And
were you really single-digit?
7%, man.
Oh, I got 8, man.
I'm pretty sure I went back again. Well, you what?
8%.
This guy was always like 2 or 3 percentage points better than me, but we were both always at the bottom of the class for like years.
Well, because I DQ'd all the time.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
His scoring method is...
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of makes
zero
sense.
really easily.
Yeah, you really do not want to kill the person next to the person you're trying to shoot.
It's not a good idea. You don't get welcome back.
Interesting. So you guys were literally single digits. I didn't know that.
Well,
I did not know that.
The one thing that, I would counsel Jeff on now, which I think he's starting to recognize in himself, but at the time was a little bit of a blind spot, was people are differently abled. And as a Navy SEAL, when you're not training other Navy SEALs that are perfect human specimens, they need to solve problems around the gun. At that point in time, any vocalization I made about, I don't really know if this is the right thing for me or the right equipment or whatever, it came off sounding like an excuse because he's heard it 100,001 times.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Why would he need to coach me personally on something I needed to get around? So that precipitated yet another discovery of gear. And I went, now it became the Goldilocks. I got to find all the right stuff to fix this problem in Jeff's class.
So, okay.
But, you know,
I've heard this analogy a number of times that people are basically, if you're into guns, you're probably a nerd. And I mean, like, if you're really into guns, not if you're like, you know, I have a gun somewhere.
Yeah.
Because to do that, you have to have all this stuff.
Gear-centric.
It's very gear-centric. You have to have, I mean...
I'm on a journey with that, but...
Well, you have to have it at least long enough to learn what works and doesn't work. And then you're like, ugh, this is garbage. And so you end up with a bunch of stuff, but it's sort of like tinkering. Like, is this carburetor is going to work? No, it's garbage. Throw it away. What about this other one? Oh, it works pretty good, but it drains the battery for some reason or whatever. You know, you kind of like...
But why is it that way? Because this is... I look at it now, and it's a very straight line.
But only if you know.
Only if you know. So
that is a big difference between knowing, because you don't know. I mean, who's the voice of reason on the internet about this?
Oh, well, this is the big elephant in the room, is that what no one wants to admit about starting and shooting is that it's 99% male, and most of the industry is there to protect fragile male egos.
Absolutely agree.
It's not there to actually help you find the solution you're looking for,
or even to sell you a solution. Well, and it's also to sell you a solution to all your problems.
Right.
The gear-centrism, I guess if that's even a word,
yes,
is the industry understands this. And this isn't anything against the industry. They're appealing to their market, right? Which is mostly people not like us.
Yep.
It's mostly...
But it's people who you used to be.
Well, if you consider yourself like a golfer,
right?
This industry would seem very familiar to you because it involves hand-eye coordination, stamina, thinking, and most of the time you're pissed off with your performance, and so you're looking for the next gadget to fix whatever problem props up. So it's not as though it's
not
unique.
you, it's the sights.
It's like I gotta have that. I gotta have that dope grip to just really get around it. But for me, I really did have ergonomic hurdles. I had eyesight problems that, you know, with the at the time the religious fervor around shooting iron sights simply reduced my ability to stay in the class and keep up with the drills, because I was getting single digit percentages for years until I made some of those equipment changes, tested them out, and realized that, yes, there are some things, if you're differently abled, that will allow you to perform better, or at least it's a time hack that will allow you to overcome something that's problematic. But getting back to the point, what no one tells you is there is a level 0 in shooting.
Yeah.
And if you're watching or listening to this and you don't know what I'm talking about, you're at level 0.
Very likely.
You can be in level 0 for a very, very long time.
Or maybe your entire life.
And you may have a lot of aptitude.
And you may shoot all the time.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with money, frequency, gear choice.
Yeah.
You only leave that zone when you are finally able to look at the paper and know why you did something you didn't. But before we get to that, to me, the big unlock coming out of that first, spate of failures was I found this community of shooters. Mm-hmm. I don't think I would have continued if I hadn't saw kind of a little bit of myself in guys like you on the other side of the classroom, asking those good questions and trying to work through a lot of the same sorts of challenges in different ways.
Though, Chris, while I agree with you, and I mentioned earlier, what kept me going. You mentioned Jeff and his standard and everything else. Not having that information, right? The internet is a plethora of bad advice when it comes to firearms, and it's really impossible when you're at level 0, like you described, to tell what the difference is. There was something about Jeff that said, this is the goods. Like, this person knows what they're doing. Yeah. They know just by his credentials alone, but his training methodology felt really familiar to me because he was in the military. Yep. And even though I didn't do any kind of special operator type of training, there was just a certain legitimacy to his standard and his standard was brutal.
Sure
And
was.
well, being like a metrics guy and a ranking and ratings kind of guy, this became the carrot for me.
Well, I knew I couldn't find, at that point, I knew I couldn't really find it elsewhere. So it was like water to a man in the desert. So I had to have more. And as I looked around for other sources of water, I kept continually finding things I didn't need. And it was very easy to start to...
Can you give me an example? Just
Yeah.
what you mean by that?
So thankfully, the conversation, the zeitgeist around internet shooting now, there is this discussion kind of vaguely about training. You need to get it. You got to train. It's not really specific on how to define like your objective and your why, how to identify your why and then actually meet
That is my
objective.
literally next question. So just get that in your head right now.
Yeah.
I'd like to know your why.
So the result is you can waste a lot of time in training and turn a lot of money into sound on your free weekends, and still not really understand what you've done. You may walk away with some new hard skills, or you've done some things with the gun that surprised you and gave you more confidence. That you can probably get from going to any class. But will you know what you need to do tomorrow to maintain or better yet improve? And so I kind of then quickly got into competing because I followed the herd of people who were starting to think like me about guns and were kind of on this journey. But that then thankfully took me out of the internet swirl. And I just started having conversations with guys like you. And it just was like, well, what's working for you? What are you struggling with? And then hearing everybody go around the room and being really pissed that there were guys in the class that were getting 65, 75, 85%. And like, I shot almost as good as these guys. What's going on? And so to some extent, even the rigor built into his system forced me to at least go back again and see if I'd improved, which I've never gone back to any other firearms trainer, and I've been to a lot of training companies, specifically because I want to then go back and determine have I actually improved. And I know I will get a grade. I know I will know.
And it'll be the
if I've
same
improved.
standard,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So going back
For
time
like
and time
20 years
again.
from now, it'll probably be the same thing.
Well, yeah. Well, I think I trained with Jeff for like 3 straight years.
Same.
Almost monthly. Sometimes the classes varied, but it was about passing his class, right? For a long time. And I know this sounds crazy, but you got to have goals, right?
Yeah.
So this is your why right here.
Well,
Just passing.
but also this, if you pass his class, then there was this additional carrot,
Which is
that you,
much harder than it
that you could
sounds.
draw from the holster, that he would give you a holster card, and that you'd be able to then practice drawing from the holster at the range. It turned out that turned out to be sort of a unicorn, but it worked, right? And so it was about passing his class and knowing that if you pass Jeff's class, at the very least, you're legit.
Yeah. And it kind of helped me make analogies to the other things that I had done in my life that were intense focus, investment heavy, and time intensive. So, becoming a pilot, you have ratings and you have different levels. As a diver, you know exactly what you know and you don't know because you can see the progression. And so that's what's missing in many cases is just a visible understanding of what's next. What should I be working towards and thinking about? It wasn't my why to stay in and shoot, but it was the vehicle that allowed me to continue justifying the investment.
Well, he struck on something that I definitely wanted to bring up today, which is you mentioned, we talked about gear centrism. We talked about being tech nerds and things and numbers and number crunchers, but on another podcast, which I listened to a year or so ago, which was a gun-related podcast, it was brought up, and I don't have the data on this, but there seems to be a lot of truth on it, that there is a strong correlation between serious, like firearms people, right? Scuba diving and piloting.
Interesting. You're a trifecta.
And he's the trifecta, and I'm a PADI scuba instructor. I hardcore scuba diving for years in all sorts of crazy.
I'm just waiting for better weather because that is literally the next thing I'm going to go do.
Yeah, I mean,
great.
Yes,
I'm serious.
This guy's been trying to. Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm dead serious. I just again better weather.
Then
well, actually,
the
the weather's been amazing, but it's also January, so I'm always waiting for the weather to turn. But yeah, no, really. Now piloting, on the other hand, I have a little bit of an issue with because I like my alcohol, and so I don't think that's gonna jive well with the other things going on in my life.
8 hours bottom of the throttle.
Yeah, exactly.
The Russian way.
Well, ironically, all three don't mix with alcohol, right?
What's that?
All three don't mix with alcohol.
That's true.
Diving too.
Yeah, which was strange that I'm really into booze as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that too.
Well, here's what I will.
In common, I just realized.
Yeah. but the common thread for me, the red thread, is we are seeking mastery and control. Mm-hmm. We're seeking to overcome the environment. We don't want the environment to dictate our human limitations. And that is a strong drive.
Okay, but yes, why us and not others? We've taken a lot of classes, and a lot of people have not followed this trajectory.
Oh yeah,
they're gone.
Like 80%, 90%. Maybe higher.
Maybe much higher.
Oh, I would go with higher. Yeah, 95 at least.
Okay, but why? Like, why do you think they aren't following through? What?
I know a couple of specific reasons, and people you and I know. Let's face it, no part of being graded in that class is ever comfortable. Mm-hmm. So the question is, when you're graded, how do you react? How does that affect you? Can you stay focused on what that grade is telling you and what it can help you do? Or are you...
Yeah, but why do you care? I think is kind of the question.
Why do I care that I got graded badly or that I didn't?
Why do you care about your score at all?
The true Stoic would say, who cares? I just did the
I just
thing.
came here to learn some stuff and then leave.
I did or didn't. And
well, I thankfully was able to keep close to that. I mean, I was so enthralled. Like, I'm so embarrassed to say this publicly, but I wrote this embarrassing email to Jeff after the first class, basically trying to become like his personal brander to help his business succeed. Cause I thought everybody needed to know this. Like, I'm like, dude, you're sitting on gold. What are you doing? Here's 50 suggestions right off the top of my head on a Sunday night after I've been in a class for 2 days. No, but I think that, I think what it did was energize me. And what I observed from other people who were in those classes, who I was close to that did not come back, it was either an extreme frustration and not finding their breakthrough that ultimately weeded them out. But more importantly, it was just, fuck this guy.
There was a lot of that.
Who was he to say that I'm any good? Or, you know, his this isn't the military, you know, he can't talk to me like that. And I'm like, first of all, I look back at it and I'm like, I don't recall Jeff ever being, he was managing the range. He was managing safety.
Yeah, of course.
I never at one point ever felt like I was attacked or somehow, but there are people who will say that they had a very negative experience. Some
people are more fragile.
I don't,
No, they are. They're more easily offended, or they didn't know what to expect from Jeff, and were expecting.
You're right. They're expecting affirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
And they spent money, and so why aren't they better?
Right. Or why didn't they pass?
Yeah,
because there's a lot of egos involved for sure.
Well, and it's funny. The more people you talk to who have spent a lot of times around guns, they also dislike being graded.
Oh, absolutely.
And so you'll see people actively avoid or disparage specifically his method and the Tricon program.
Well,
because I think there is ego component. They've become just good enough, and maybe with a little bit of internet sensationalism wrapped around them, they've carved out a niche as someone who knows more than other people, and to challenge that or grade that or put themselves hold them by another standard is also very threatening.
You know, I would say in my exposure to, as I think I I don't think I actually have mentioned I'm a very avid competitive firearms sports person.
We're going to get to that.
I know, but contextually, people need to know this.
Yeah.
I've encouraged so many people to come out, right, and get involved. And some of the people that have been shooting for years, own 50 firearms, lots of ammo, and they know every statistic you ever heard of, but they don't want to be tested in any way. And so,
and honestly, that's okay, but it will only take them so far.
Right. But it's a unwillingness to commit, right, to your own personal excellence. And, you asked about the why. I think for me, what drives me, because I can't speak to other people, but I'm never satisfied with myself. That sounds sad, right? Maybe depressing a little, but it's a driver for me. It's no matter how good I am, it's never enough, right?
I'm very satisfied with myself, but
I am too when I look back at it. But in the moment, what drives me forward is I could have done better.
Well, it's interesting because in this case, it is the same motivation. It's just, but why? I have no real thing to hang on. Like, I also, run like you do and have competed in a lot of other things. Yeah. I honestly haven't, other than the fact that I really honestly believed this is one thing in life I can't afford to be bad at. And that's just, I can't shake that. I can't shake that idea that, this is so fundamental, right? We wouldn't be talking about this and being all introspective if this was 150 years ago, because it might, depending on your life circumstance, literally be the difference between you breathing tomorrow and not, or you making it through the winter. And that was a very widely accepted rationale up until very recently. I mean, my childhood, that was still an accepted rationale, but it's not anymore. And no one even believes that that's true in the modern era, even if it might be for a lot of people. So for me, I cannot imagine I can't look at myself in the mirror and be like, oh, you're just adequate at this. Because God help me if I ever have to meet someone who's better at this than me and I'm on the wrong side of the barrel.
Okay, so that's the first time I've heard either of you mention self-defense.
Yeah. No, you're good.
So that is and always has been my why.
Yeah.
Always.
It was never mine initially.
Just self-defense.
I mean, I would say that it was mine. That would have been a token response in the beginning, but I look back on it and I'm like, no, you didn't do anything to really protect yourself back in the day. You weren't physically fit. You weren't trained in martial arts or blades. Chris, like, what are you thinking? Why guns?
Okay. We'll get to all that. Yeah. But I'm curious. So for me, like, I've had a lot of death threats, for instance. I've had multiple break-ins to houses I used to live in once upon a time. Miscreants. Just random opportunistic crime kind of thing. But the death threats were real, or at least some of them. Some of them were real. Some of them were absolute garbage. But some of them were like, this is a person who's going to come and try to find me, and back channel, I could see this happening. I have a special set of skills. I have never felt like it was a possibility to be bad at it, and yet I was.
This is the conundrum, right? So that gnaws at you, that chews at the fiber of your self-confidence and your ability to go back out into the world that you now understand is a lot more dangerous than you really appreciated. Because I think for people who maybe are listening or watching this and don't have a lot of experience with guns, imagine if you now know that you're bad at this and you've been around even just other people in the class that are better than you. All of a sudden the whole world's better than you.
Oh yeah. Well,
that becomes a legitimate psychological driver.
Well, that's that. When I discovered that I was terrible at firearms and was on this journey to not suck, people along the way, especially here in Texas, it's fairly straightforward to get a carry permit, and it's a pretty
an affirmative culture.
It's a very pro 2A kind of state. People encouraged me repeatedly to get my carry license, and I just refused to do it until I was good enough for the same reasons you just sort of described. Was I suddenly know I suck at these things, right? So why on earth would I go out and get a license and then start actively carrying? And it wasn't because, well, hey, you can empower your own self-defense. For me, it was, I'm not really sure I am going to empower my self-defense. More likely, I'm going to just shoot the unintended targets.
And this is level 0.
This is level 0.
If you're wanting to know what differentiates level 0 and level 1, it's safety and the absence of ego.
Yeah. So, you know what I love about, I got to say this, I love this about Texas, and I have acquired quite a bit of psychology around self-defense, and it's a very big deal for me now. And one of the things I really love about Texas, I do love that it is a pro 2A state. I love that they passed legislation to bring out open carry for reasons we can go into later. But ultimately, and even this stuff that allows for all these different types of weapons to be carried, which I would love to talk about as well. But the thing is that with firearms, this state can be like sort of a shining star of an example of how a 2A state can be successful, but I feel we haven't done enough. And what I would love to see legislatively in Texas, and I don't know what the money and the funding and all that other fun stuff how you would sort that out, but if we could take it to the next level where it's not just that you can open carry without a license, because you can now here, it's let's do state funded training.
Oh my God. That's like blows the mind, right?
Right? The idea is let's not have everyone be level 0. Let's have everyone be at least level 1. Right? And make it easy and accessible. And I know that it would just continue to drive that, and it would allow states that are very counterculture to Texas and want to say, this is the worst thing you can do. Instead, show dropping crime rates and like lower death rates and everything across the board. Yet a higher per capita gun rate and self-defense would just really cancel those arguments.
I'm really interested in your perspective on this too, because I look at this as, you're in your journey started in your professional career started as one who is working in the ambiguity of the early internet and creating useful order, if not for profit, if for fun and for other reasons. And you get to this point where standards now are just really necessary. Mm-hmm. And if anything, one of the challenges still today is that there isn't a good corporate governance standard to measure CIOs and CTOs against, right? We saw this with like the hacks in Vegas and stuff like this, when people are saying, yeah, I took the weekend class. I'm certified. I'm a CSIO. It kind of goes for personal defense too. Like, I would just love a standards body. I would love a common language. It'd be nice if we had state subsidized training, but I don't know if I even necessarily need that if we're all talking about taking care of each other and ourselves in the same way.
Generally what happens is there's competing bodies. That's the problem. Yeah. You have 18 different companies who want to provide the service. Those companies all have competing interests and ideas on what would be a standard, and you just never get consensus. That's how you end up with like 20 versions of authentication. Everyone's going to have single factor authentication, and they're all just going to use my federated identity system and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, now you have 20 of them as opposed to just one.
Well, I just want to see people taking the guns they're purchasing and learning how to actually use them.
Okay, so let's talk about training. Where do you see the average person walking in the door? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the experience when you see people who've just never shot before walking in? What are they like? Like,
Terrifying.
How do you get them from nothing to level 1? Like, what does that training cycle look like?
Do you want to start? I know I actively teach.
Yeah, I think Ed's qualified to talk about how the transformation comes about for me.
Do you teach as well? Just for fun, just to people you need to.
On the side. Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
All three of us teach then.
I mean, I try to
don't-
pass
don't
on
get-
what I know.
I don't get paid for it. I do it for
Same.
fun. But that's very important information. So you teach what happens when someone walks in who's never shot before.
The thing that really bugs me, and the only part of shooting that I really care passionately about making sure that I can like affect in people, is turning it from one of two starting points. A toy. I'm here at the bachelor party to have fun and turn money into sound, and yay, I get a picture of me behind a full auto. I appreciate that's a kind of important part of the economic business that a lot of ranges need to sustain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm glad someone even took the risk of going out and doing something they never conceived of doing before, especially if they're not from the United States.
Yeah.
The second one is taking away the idea that a gun is a talisman. I am protected because I own it. I would rather you not have a gun if you believe the simple act of purchasing it changes your life in any way.
Well, and we saw that in the pandemic, right?
Absolutely.
But it's wonderful that there was this amazing
Surge.
upswing of new first-time gun owners, because a certain slice of that percentage ended up getting to level 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to call it, right? And so that's been a great thing for the sport and for the industry in general. But so many people did just what you described. They went during those first few months, bought a gun, bought one box of ammunition, and it's still in their sock drawer, protecting them.
Or worse yet, they're carrying it in the misguided belief that they're protected.
Holy
And
smokes.
if you've ever seen a video of a firearm used against its owner, I can assure you there are a lot of people out there. And if you're, listening or watching to this and you feel like you haven't done enough training based on the way we're talking about it and thinking about it, the answer is you're right. You haven't.
I agree.
And I don't need an empirical basis for that. It's the idea that if you can't meet some of these minimum standards that are out there that all of us are now very familiar with, we very much understand that you're barely safe, let alone effective, let alone
John
capable.
Wick, badass.
Well, yeah, whatever you need in
Because
your
that's
head.
what a lot of people are thinking. They,
For sure.
As you said, they come in, they do the mag dump. Like, wow, I'm fast. I'm fast at shooting. Well, what you're fast at doing is pulling a trigger, but
badly.
Sure. At 5 yards and
I mean,
and
not hitting.
putting it all over the paper.
if an
yeah.
alien came down and was like, "What is this shooting thing you described? Explain it to a 5-year-old." I'd say, you have to hold an explosion in your hands, and in the ability to control that explosion will determine whether you live or die. That's what it is. So the more you can control and direct that energy, that mass, that is the actual skill. It's a precision sport, whether you want to look at it in those terms or not. And so as a result, it's perishable. As a result, it requires a minimum amount of time and connection to it to be good. And that's not me saying that because I'm at some point. I'm like, there isn't another alternative.
okay. So I believe it was Plato, but I'm not 100% sure it was Plato or Epictetus. I can't remember. One of them was basically saying, like, I'd rather be a wrestler than like a archer or a bowman or something. I can't remember. Spearman or something like that. Because I always have it on me as a part of the martial arts, which it really, really is. It's just a different kind of martial art. Like, where do you see it ranking amongst, doing karate or jiu-jitsu or something else?
It's hard for me to speak intelligently about those because I also haven't tried and mastered those. So what you're hearing or what you're about to hear is one asshole's opinion. I believe
Maybe two assholes.
two assholes' opinion.
I might not say anything.
I think all of them are valid. The point, I think and this is I'm sure you'll resonate with this from your experience with BJJ, is that as long as you are not afraid of closing the distance,
Sometimes you don't have a choice.
I
That's
mean,
the problem.
most of the time.
That's the real problem.
Unless you're the one initiating contact, you are going to be contacted.
And okay, but the other version of that is sometimes you don't have a gun on you. If you're at a bar,
There's situations. It's inevitable.
what are you going to do? You just not defend yourself?
So there's more than one tool in the toolbox most of the time. It just so happens that a gun is kind of like a multi-tool. Whereas, hand-to-hand combat sports are limited by your physical manipulation of space. So this is why guns exist, right? Is because we did wrestle and poke and stab and punch and break for millennia. The only thing that has changed in the last 500 years is the distance at which we can deliver the effect. So it's the most capable tool.
And your size. I mean, look at the two of you guys.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that.
You are not the same height, weight, class.
I wrestled enough to know that like a 115-pound guy can kick the shit out of me.
True.
Pretty fast.
True.
My weight is not
but on a typical like boxing match, let's say,
Fair.
it would be completely unfair.
Oh, it would be. So, one thing I'm sure neither of you know about, first of all, for those who aren't watching or seeing me, I'm a 5'4", and when I was in my 20s, I probably weighed 130 pounds. All right, I weigh a little more than that now, but not a lot more.
Lucky.
I used to, so I do agree. The idea of me getting into a physical confrontation with my fists is not optimal, especially or wrestling for that matter. That's not to say I couldn't, but less optimal. What neither of you know, because I've never talked about this, is I used to do a lot of knife fighting.
Awesome.
Meeting in parking lots, 10 o'clock at night in random locations and fighting with knives. Obviously blunted so that we wouldn't kill each other, but it was very dangerous, very savage, and so much fun. Okay? And I got hurt a lot. And I had a lot of bruised ribs and things like that over it because we would be stabbing and slashing each other. But I was fairly effective with that. And so there was already sort of that self-defense component. I don't know why I was doing it. It was fun. It was hard to do. It was a little dangerous. But it also was an equalizer for someone like myself, right? So somebody big like yourself, Chris, were to come at me, I can carry a knife and I can carry it kind of anywhere.
I'm glad you brought up Samuel Colt's famous phrase. Equalizer is a really important component. And as a, I used to have great eyesight, 2020. Loved everything about manipulating objects at speed in 3D space when I was younger. And, when you have to land like 2,000 pounds of aluminum moving a couple hundred miles an hour, you start to kind of put risks in like a real trade-off context. And what I look at it is, can I do this thing and protect myself most of the time? And here's where the fragile male ego part kind of comes in, both in positive and negative ways. I don't have that I'm far away from that person now. And I could put a lot of time, energy, and money into a physique or a skill set that involved, martial combat. I'm kind of self-aware enough at this point that that might be a longer journey than this pistol thing that I'm doing too. Right. So at some point, where are you at with that skill set? And it's constantly shifting, right?
So if I were to invite you and I'd say, let's go.
Oh
let's go do this thing together.
Let me get my singlet.
Not literally right here.
Oh, damn.
I'm glad you brought your singlet though. That's
always. It's like
in the trunk, yeah.
Just in case
I pull out the gun or the singlet. And you're like, what's next?
But what if we said, like, let's go do this together? It would be a group of, I have a little bit more skill doing this than you, but people who are not experts. We would all be humiliated by experts.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I would be humiliated by either of you.
But maybe not, Ed, because as he said, it is a skill thing. And
that's true.
And
if you make the mistake of getting inside of this circle, maybe. Staying inside this.
But it's not just that. You're competitive.
Sure.
That's I think the thing that I'm taking away from this.
I see.
It's a minimum component.
It isn't really a skill thing, because if it was just skill alone, people would stop. It's also grit. It's also working through it to get the extra skill and then the extra skill, and just
it's very rewarding.
It's extremely rewarding. in the sense that like you can't acquire this professionally. You can't acquire. I mean,
can't read a book on it.
There's I think a Native American saying or something. I mean, I'm sure I saw it in a movie, but essentially, the last thing I want to be is old and feeble and not dangerous anymore. Like that's the date of fear, and that was part of the beginning of the mindset journey, was a recognition of what I'm not anymore, and out of necessity acquiring a new skill set to equalize the threat environment.
It's funny. Like very often I daydream about what it would be like to have a future version of me come back in time and whether I'd want to confront that person physically, you know, go and get into some altercation. And I decided absolutely not ever.
It's a better shot than
because
you now.
yes, because the future version of me is going to be better and dangerous and much more dangerous in ways I can't even comprehend necessarily. Like these are whole new skills that maybe not even existing currently, but in the future, that Robert will have mastered them and be very, very dangerous.
The real frustrating part about past Chris James is up until probably 2020. Oh, I could kick my own ass. It didn't matter how or when. I know I could go back and kick my own ass. Let alone, you know, wreck a lot. And that's not because I've gotten much better at really anything except shooting. It's because I was so damn oblivious. It's not going to happen to me. It's not something I have to worry about. It's not a priority. It's not. I didn't have anything precious to kind of focus on. Those things are all true, but boy, I wish I had picked this up earlier, because I also would have been a lot better at it younger too. And I missed out on this opportunity to kind of spend some really great time aging into this thing.
I wish I had that too. Yeah. Or that for some reason, when I was 10 years old, I was training with firearms.
Oh man.
So, but you know, to kind of come back to something, we talk about self-defense a lot. I know we haven't dove into it per se, but one of the things that's really important, you know, we talk about kicking our own asses and knives and guns and whatever, but motivation. One of the things that's really important to me in all of this, because we talk about guns and what would I do this, shoot this threat, stop the threat, and it all sounds very terminal and very kill focused, right? I want to stress that I have no desire to kill people. I don't want to have to use a gun ever, right? I want to be prepared to use it if I must. And there are, and thank God inside the more active community that I'm involved with, there isn't this bravado or machismo, but there is a lot of that in the community, like the larger level 0 community, to kind of use your, right? Which is, you know, I want to have a gun so I can use it. And they may not say that, but it's kind of baked into their speech patterns and the way they communicate, is that they want to be a badass and they want to employ this weapon. And I want to stress,
talisman effect. I have spent $5,000 on this AR, so I must
use it and
must be a badass.
Unless you're at a birthday party, you just clack off a couple rounds. Yeah, you know, that's different.
I mean, for weddings in Kazakhstan, I mean, you know, but no big deal.
That's my message, right? If there's someone out there who's listened to this and has heard and maybe subscribed to the idea that they're level 0, I would ask them another question, and that would be, why do you have a gun, right? Is it for your self-defense, or is it for the wrong reasons? It's kind of like, hate to use the Karate Kid, okay? But are you the Mr. Miyagi side, or are you the Cobra Kai side, right? And if you're Cobra Kai, you need to reevaluate. I would ask you to not carry a gun, because your motives in a moment could be wrong, right? It might not be self-defense. You might be fast to use the gun when you shouldn't.
Well, even if you're skilled,
or you might even want to,
in it for the wrong reasons, and it does. I mean, what I appreciate. So this is what I really appreciate about these life and death, sorry, I'm not gonna make it even that dramatic. These risk-based things that I choose to do, like flying and diving, and is, yes, there's a component of control and mastery of that, and that's a human drive. That's, you know, a Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing. The bigger thing, I think, is that interlinks motivation and, your desire to give up resources to pursue something like this is the fact that it creates focus. And this is maybe where the martial component can do it, but doesn't always. Because you might just want to compete at BJJ, right? It's athletic.
What's that?
Keeps you ripped. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, okay. I'm like, he keeps saying it, and I'm like, finally, I'm going to ask.
I should ask now. What's that thing?
That's very telling.
What we're trying to do
Means even more that I need to introduce you.
We need to get
Right,
close to
right.
death to know how close and or how far away we are. I think there's something about that. And so when you add this risk, you also elevate your focus and attention. And I can't describe to anybody who doesn't do that. My sister, for example, is so risk averse. Even travel decisions are based off of what I don't want to see or what I don't want to be near or whatever.
Like actual fear of being hurt? Or?
I actually don't even think it's real fear. It's just this mental block that when there is risk, that is something to just be avoided. Let's just avoid it.
Wow.
Like, I'm not going to go scuba diving. It looks and sounds super cool. I believe everything you're saying, Christian. I love your pictures, but there's sharks in that water. Did you know that?
I see.
So, I mean, once you get down there and you swim with them, it turns out it's not that big of a deal. Once you land that 2,000 pounds of aluminum and don't die, you know it's possible. And so it creates a new affirmation that you can cling to and kind of, I guess, becomes something of an addiction to constantly test yourself with that control. Like, I love nothing more. When I fly, the only thing I care about is my landing, where I put the plane.
Huh.
Hopefully not running into anything as well.
He's not concerned about it as it sounds.
that part I'm not worried about because the intense preparation I put into avoiding objects,
Other
at
flying
high
objects.
speed is a lot. But at the end of the day,
your point. I'm
you
just being
got to
funny.
come back down, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of, I look at at firearms the same way, or even combat sports. When you know that focus, and I have ADHD bad, I don't know that focus in every part of my life. So for me, it really does have a psychochemical component.
It makes sense.
Okay, so back to something, Ed, I think you said very early on, cops were an example.
Bad boys.
So I think people perceive being in the military, being in the police department, being a special operator or whatever is somehow going to make them good when they walk in the range.
Right.
And some of them, as you said, might be good. On the whole, are they? I mean, like, what would you rank the average person who walks in with some formal firearms training?
I don't have metrics, obviously, so it's just my exposure, right? But if I had to guess from my exposure, maybe 50% of the police force is capable, like really capable. Like their skill is adequate to what I would consider my standard. Maybe half of them, so 1/4, are really good, right? And they dedicate themselves to being excellent.
Now, are they good because of the training they received, or are they good because of training they took outside of the
my
training
impression,
they received?
Being that I was never in the police force,
Sure.
right? Therefore, I am speaking from a position of definite ignorance, right? Is that, but my exposure to those police officers, they're the ones in competitive sports. They're the ones that are dry firing at night. They're practicing and they're putting in the time like everybody else who's serious.
Right.
And they're excellent because of it. Though others there's a lot of, I wouldn't call them all level 0, but they're like level 1.
They're really hoping they don't actually have to use the skill set. That's really what, I mean, there is either an actual fear of using it or no desire to get closer to it. I mean, let's not dance around it. A lot of people believe if we had a gun out here on the table, some segment of the audience their eyes would be transfixed on it because they're waiting for it to shoot one of us, like point itself at us and ostensibly go off. Or maybe they think we're all just completely insane and one of us is going to pick it up and shoot one of the 3 people in this room.
Right.
Well, there's a segment of society that doesn't really understand what's happening when you're shooting. So the other part who are forced to use it, I've had the privilege of going to a couple of classes where on my right I had infantrymen and on my left I had Austin SWAT. I had a Marine on my left. I had 2 APD SWAT, at least guys claiming SWAT, wanting to be in, let's say, probably training to get into SWAT. And all I can tell you is what I saw on the paper. And the great part about it was there was very little difference between me and them.
Well, either that's affirming or alarming.
I think it went well.
Was this when you were at single digits or?
Yeah.
Still, yes. This was still at single digits, but kind of, I had started to break out of just Jeff's curriculum exclusively.
Okay, that's not a great. That's not a big rubber stamp.
No. Oh, sorry. By Jeff's standards, I would still be single digits in this class. We didn't have grades, so the papers look pretty good. No, I would say that you guys can rest easy. The people who are paid to defend us know more than the other people I'm talking about.
Sure.
But does that make them as proficient as Ed? Actually, no. It may surprise a lot of people in your audience to understand that competitive shooters shoot way more.
Oh my!
Then your limited tax dollars can afford even the military.
Amen.
To shoot. He's shooting probably as much as maybe special forces, and that might sound
and I'm not qualifying myself as
no. He can't. No. He's not in that cadre, but they pull the trigger the same amount. And again, reps alone is not skill, as we know, right?
Absolutely.
And it took me many years to get out of single digits in Jeff classes, and I had a lot of reps. It was different things coming together to create the skill and allow me to unlock additional levels. And look at where we're at now. The last class we took was 3-4 months ago. The new big unlock there. And of course, Jeff calls it, well, you guys are now at level 1. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Loved that comment. But there was something really, I think, important about it was now we can forecast our skill.
Level 1, but we're at level 3.
We're at the end of level 1, poking at his concept of level 2. But the big skill difference there is now we can forecast.
DP3 is his own.
Exactly.
Yeah, DP3 is his own, but you
hear that, Jeff? You're gonna have to change that.
Well, I mean, he told me, he's like, yeah, that's still like I still put that in my level 1 program. But I'm always humbled. But I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think when we look at people who are really in the sport to compete and go beyond, I'm here for personal defense, but I want to get so good I can go really fast and shoot really accurately or move with the gun, apply all these other.
Well, there's different motives for that, which I'll be happy to go into. But back to the original point of the police, and you made a great point about funding and the cost, right? I think what my issue I know that there are limited funds and that just like in the military, you apply those funds and the training appropriately based on the role and the position. But the issue for me isn't that there are police officers who are not very good. It's the public's assumption that they are.
Well, they're right around the corner to help you too.
Right.
Supposedly.
And the same with the military, as I pointed out earlier in the conversation, which is, oh, you're ex-Army, then you must be good. No, not necessarily. Now, what I will tell you in my experience, what I have seen of special operators, they're all really good.
Are they?
Yeah.
I haven't met a real special operator that had the real credentials that wasn't at least a badass.
And if I had to
there might be some, but I have never met one. That doesn't mean they're a good teacher or that they're good at communicating that, but their capabilities were there.
I'm glad to hear that. I have encountered a few that were surprisingly bad for what they said they did.
Then did they have legit credentials?
I was going to say, let's remember that special ops community.
I know exactly right.
How would I know?
Right.
Yeah, right. It's a big community. There's a lot of people in it, and skill is a spectrum.
And also, people's skill drifts over time
Of
as
course,
well.
it's
So
perishable skill.
it is and also, your eyes can change, your hands can change, right? There's a lot of things that could cause injury or whatever. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
But it is suspiciously bad for the title you have or you claim to have.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, it's really easy to throw around title in this industry and stuff like that. And I think that's why the question is really good. What I really appreciate about your question is, can we assume with anyone who picks up a gun, a basic or set or minimum viable product with that? And the answer is very much no, I think, for everybody, because it's all time dependent.
Okay, so this was the crux of why I wanted you here. Neither of you told me what you did. Neither of you have any reason at all to be good at guns. I mean, like, not really.
Oh my God, not
really.
Not really.
It's not like you're out there trying to defend us on the front lines of something or whatever, or having to arrest,
you guys aren't expecting
the next terrorist or whatever. You don't have that. That's not what.
In fact, I actively live a life to avoid those risks.
Absolutely.
I mean, the rest of my life is tuned so that I just survive the 1 in a million. I'm not in a dangerous job. I don't live in a particularly dangerous area, and I have no reason.
You have
to believe my
had some
choice.
crime near your house.
Near my house, been robbed in California. I definitely have reasons to not believe that I just can walk around with impunity in the world because I'm white and I'm middle class, and that makes.
But the cool part is, you guys, I think, represent some weird upper echelon of shooters, and
hard to define.
But I see a lot of people shoot too. I mean, I've trained a lot of people from nothing, from literally never shot before. Obviously, there's zero, right, as you said. And then there's the people who they pick it up quickly. They're shooting out of 25 yards, shooting 8-inch rings quickly, like in one day they've figured it out, and they're doing everything right. Level 1 on day 1. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch. It's
some
rare.
people have some really cool aptitude. Yeah.
It's rare. I've seen it literally twice.
Yeah, my wife's that way.
And then you have the next level, right, where you're like starting to really group it in. It's getting more complicated. There's stressors, there's speed components, there's reloads, there's
so much
things going wrong with the gun, etc. Okay, so we're certainly not level 1, because I think level 1 is just shooting the target with whatever time constraints you want to.
Not shooting yourself,
unloading and loading
discrimination.
Safely, right?
That's right.
That to me, that's level 1.
That's level 1.
I can level 0 for me. I mean, I think you can't. I think you can't.
No. And shooting the target.
Like accurately?
Yes, accurately shooting the target.
I think if you're gonna
with no stressors at all.
I mean, it depends on how many levels we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, but
yeah.
To me, level 1 is if you can unload, load, and shoot the target accurately at virtually any distance, out to 25 yards.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that. I would agree with that.
I'd say that's level 1.
I certainly
with no stressors.
Yeah, I was going to say I would certainly look at somebody
stressors.
like that and say, "Let's go shoot." Like my reaction to that would be, "Awesome, let's go shoot." I'm not worried about my life, just standing near you, and maybe we can learn from each other. So yeah, I think so.
Well, so that's kind of a good transition for competitive shooting. So. Also, because obviously Jeff Gonzalez has been a huge pivotal part of my journey. I don't really train with him much anymore, but he was absolutely my Mr. Miyagi of sorts, right? But he had competitions every once in a while. There was a period where I think it was like once a month on Sunday mornings that they would have this gunfighter competition. And it was some kind of weird thing he invented that was sort of like USPSA, which is United States Practical Shooting Association, which is one of the more popular competitive firearms sports. But I remember this moment. I went to shoot that, and I was like middling with him in his classes, right? And I drew the gun from my holster, and I raised it to the target, and I remember specifically it was my STI.
The STI
and it limited, I saw it vibrating. Right, the gun was up, and I could see the end of the barrel literally shaking from the stress of this, and I was awful again. And it was really powerful moment of, to your point, a level 1 shooter. Let's just say that I was at that time a level 1 shooter. I realized there was a level 2, right?
Yeah.
And that under any kind of stress, I was just awful again.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, and how do you get stressors? How do you, now you can't say USPSA is real world at under any circumstance, but the idea that you're moving forward laterally, negotiating terrain, and reloading, firing at multiple targets, at different targets, sometimes moving targets.
So how many Jeff classes did you take before you were frustrated that you weren't moving, you knew this was a flat range, and you felt your skill stagnating? Because to me, that's also a commonality in Jeff's classes, because the fundamentals are so religiously enforced.
Well, but
that I'm like,
yeah,
I want to move with this thing. I want to know what I can do outside.
But there's also like physical limitations where we were.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's nothing against like him or the class design. It is literally just a limitation of the range environment and frankly being safe.
To answer your question though,
but it gnaws at you. You're like,
I struggled for a long time. So my frustration was very low. I was still just trying to hit the target at 25 yards, right? But at that point where I started to recognize that in order to actually, if you ever needed to apply this skill, right, under stress, just with the competitive stress in a range in a controlled situation, I fell apart. I realized everything I'd learned up to this point was just still garbage. Right? It was super eye-opening, and I said that's why I got into competitive sports, because it wasn't to level up or to become a whatever class shooter. It was I started recognizing there's like memory stress, movement stress, competitive stress, personal performance stress, other people watching you stress.
Timing is a big one.
Right. And just so many other things. Right. Yeah. And having to shoot under the clock, as we even see in Jeff classes, when he brings and introduces a timer, things fall apart.
Flinch.
Or they shoot too fast or whatever. Right. And don't learn how to use their time appropriately. But the point was, that's what's driven me. And then, of course, all the other things in that sport that help kind of keep you hooked. But I can shoot much better, far better than I ever could before under those normal range conditions.
While we're on this topic,
yeah,
because it changes regularly, so I'm not going to try to guess. Where are you ranked currently?
Oh, I'm not going to throw numbers out.
Come on.
No, because I don't actually know right now.
Yeah, approximately.
And they're not official numbers. I would say, so my primary sport that I focus on, I do shoot USPSA, but I also am very specialized in what's called Steel Challenge, which is also owned by USPSA, and it is primarily speed shooting at steel targets. They're very standardized courses, but they range in their wide arcs, and the steel at ranges anywhere between, I think, about 7 yards and 35 yards. And you're expected to draw from what they call surrender, which is above your head. So, or above your hands are above your shoulder. And on a tone, you draw your pistol from a holster and you engage these targets as fast as you can, and you must hit them. All right. And there are these times called peak, which is like 100% score. And they are generally around 2.5 seconds for most of the scenarios.
For probably at least 5 ultra clean hits, if not more like 7 to 8.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely difficult time hack challenge.
Yes.
As you know, just hitting par and stuff on like a 10 or 12 round drill. And that doesn't involve multiple targets or lateral movement.
Right. And the average person, if you just said, put them in front of these targets, it was their first time there and they're even modestly able to draw from the holster, their first shot will probably be in 5 or 6 seconds. As opposed to drawing, engaging, and hitting all the targets across a wide array successfully in like 2.5. So where I fall inside that sport right now, based on numbers that I've seen for like recent scoring, I'm in about the top 3-4% of the sport.
Which puts you at rank what, approximately?
I don't know.
He's at least master.
Well, he's current ranking in what's called carry optics, which is essentially a gun with a red dot sight on it, is master. my percentage until they just recently changed all the numbers was about 91 or 90%. And, but ironically, when you look at the actual scoring of the current metrics, I'm actually much higher percentage against the current active shooting body of people. So I question the accuracy of their metrics, but
give me a
way,
number. What's the number?
I don't actually know. I was 80. A couple weeks ago. I was 83.
You were 83.
Number 83 out of several thousand.
All right.
In the sport.
So that's not nothing. That is. I wouldn't call that level 1.
He also has the benefit.
My point.
Well,
that is.
Let's talk about how quickly you've gone.
Yeah. Well,
how that part of it.
That was not that quickly. That was years.
It took me a couple years.
But compared to getting from 2017 to getting like an 80% in a Jeff class, might have been.
It was a long ramp. It was a long ramp up.
Whereas he's been shooting at this level for at least a year, which means he got there in probably less than a year and has since then been shaving off like tenths and hundredths of seconds to put together what he's talking about now. I mean, once you get into the competitive, just like anything at what I would almost consider pro level, you're in a different game. We're not talking about accuracy anymore. We're not talking about even like, I mean, draw holster times are part of it, but they're already so low that they beat 99.99% of shooters or people with guns that might draw out of a holster. It's so fast. And that's what's so crazy is,
and I think that's worth digging into.
Yes. No, it's like what he had to do to
how do you get from barely giving a shit to one of the best shooters in the world?
I'm not one of the best shooters in the world.
No, Ed, you absolutely are.
I think by statistics alone, you have to be.
I'm excellent. I would say that I'm excellent. That I'll give that much to myself.
I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm not saying you're better than the best. I'm saying you're better than almost anybody I've ever met.
Well, that's awfully kind of you. I know lots of people that are far better than me, but nonetheless,
at the competition where they're measuring the best.
Yeah, it's like if he lived outside of Top Gun every day and also had a pilot, like you kind of have some things working for you in terms of osmosis.
I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. This is
I know.
You're at a level that is incredibly rare on top of the fact that you're doing well in that rarefied air.
Sure.
And he's answering like a true competitor, which is I know where I need to be and where I want to be and where I'm at now.
I appreciate the humility. It's amazing. I actually really, really like it. And I don't want to take that away from you because I think the humility is working for you.
Thank you.
But I also, I look at it and just like I shake my head. I'm like, wow, that guy is incredibly good. And I look at both of you. You do not strike me as competitively good shooters, and yet both of you are better than almost anyone I've ever seen shooting. And I've probably seen thousands now of people shoot. Just going at the range and seeing people, as you said, spray and pray.
When I go downstairs occasionally, I'm reminded of how far I may have come.
You know what I like to tell people that are just getting into the competitive sport and they are really not doing well compared to everyone else. They're at the bottom of the lists, right? It can be very deflating. And I mean this with true sincerity. I tell them, you're already in the top 3% in the world, right? Because odds are they are, right? I can't say that definitively, right? But I would bet money they are. And they got the guts to go out there and take it, right? There's a lady that I teach. I'm not going to say her name because I haven't obviously been given permission, but she came out maybe a year or two ago, whatever. And she was just this mom, with her holster and didn't know anything about the sport. And what I do love about at least Central Texas's gun culture or competitive firearms culture is it's incredibly welcoming.
Oh my gosh.
Incredibly welcoming. I mean,
it's more welcoming than your local range. It is the nicest part of this.
It's competitive, thing. But everyone wants everyone to do well.
Yes.
Everyone wants everyone to be competitive against them so that they can get better. And these new people, when they show up and they don't know anything, the primary driver is we want you to have a good time. We want you to be safe. And if you're one of those people that is coming out and going, I don't know anything, and I'm just like some, single mom who bought a gun and a holster off, online, and now I want to try this, the average reaction from most people is, that is totally badass, because you got the nuts to come out and put your ego on the line.
The women have the nuts? Is that...
They got the nuts. I'm going to say it. They got the nuts.
Chutzpah.
I mean, it is. It's like you're willing to come out and, I know, like I said earlier in this podcast, that there are lots of extremely well-versed gun people who I can't get to shoot one round competitively. And they'll give you 19 reasons. Oh yeah, maybe next time. What it really is they don't have the nuts.
I'll give you a counterpoint though,
to have their ego challenged.
I put myself. I'm happy to be humbled by anybody who has something to teach me, and I will definitely be the first person to say that. And I did. I got back into USPSA like a couple of weeks ago. Went out and shot with Ed and some of the guys, and had a blast.
Awesome,
it was
by the way.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah,
I miss it. I just got to get back into that habit. But one of the things I just vehemently dislike about competitive shooting is the game. Because my motivation for holding a gun begins and ends with defense. And
Me too.
I don't want to acquire a second set of skills that I cannot utilize. And this is, by the way, I'm gonna admit right here. My rationale is
that you can't utilize it. It's the opposite of utility. It actually can pull you back.
It could.
So it could. And so I want to acknowledge that this is how I feel, but this is probably not the reality with a lot of people at the highest level. Because at some point you do get to a point where accuracy still matters, but you've mastered the speed hacks. So if you can and do continue to make it about effect on target, I believe competing will provide the right kind of motivation, the community, and the information you need to actually progress faster than doing conventional teacher-student instruction.
Okay. I think there's a partial translation. I do. Like, it's like Latin and French. If you know Latin, right, which is the game, then you're going to be able to do some French, right? And I think that's the thing is, but if you don't learn, if you don't learn any of it, then you're not going to be able to apply.
And I very much agree with
that. Okay, so to this point, when we shoot together, I see the thing that is bad about Ed. And there's only one.
I'm excited to hear this.
Is you're too fast.
Too fast.
Too fast. It's not that you don't know how to shoot well. That is not in question. No one's like, oh, Ed doesn't know how to shoot a target.
Yeah, sure.
It's just that you're so used to getting shots off so quick and not super worried about where they go sometimes. Like if you
they have to be accurate.
Yeah, but
I get you though.
You miss one on Jeff's course, let's say, and you're DQ'd. Like you're done. You're like,
I understand. Yep.
So it's not, if you had slowed down, I'm not exaggerating, 0.2 of a second, you would have been fine.
We did the Bravo standard last Friday.
Yeah.
Together. And we were testing, and this is a really interesting kind of case study that describes exactly what you're talking about. Ed's in his race rig. I've got my everyday carry.
Singlet, right, obviously.
Obviously he's greased up. He's greased up, ready to go.
Yeah.
He's got the mat in front of him. He's fenced in. And we're doing the same standard. So we're shooting the exact same drill in the exact same way, and we're repeating it for time. And good in this 10-second Bravo standard drill is 10 rounds in 10 seconds with a reload after 9.
Well, it's 9 + 1.
9 + 1.
Yeah.
And so, we're really dialing in Ed at this point. Like, he's 1.7 out of the holster, which is a little slow even for Ed. Ed can do faster.
That was slow, very slow.
But his reloads were like butter, and his split times were almost as fast as the human brain can move a muscle. This is how quickly we're talking here. And I get up, and I am not fast. I'm not a competitor. My reloads were bad for me.
4.5 seconds.
4 seconds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn it, Ed, shoot my gun.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Like, is it and our times ended up within a half a second identical once we started using everything the same. We kept the equipment the same. And so there is definitely a component of the equipment and the training that he's focusing on that provides him the time advantage. I disagree. It's not at the expense of accuracy, but if that was all that mattered, I would think it would be wasted time and effort. USPSA still requires accuracy, but it does not, I think, penalize you enough when you are faster than you are effective.
Well, I would agree because, as I've said, USPSA is not my primary sport, and it is, for those who don't know anything about it, it's moving around, navigating courses, and sometimes moving targets, primarily shooting at brown, sort of human-shaped targets that have scoring zones that vary based on sort of theoretical lethal zones and then less lethal and then sort of peripheral zones. And then it even goes further with sort of the power of your firearm, right? Where a normal 9mm bullet is X and a more powerful round has a...
Let's put powerful in air quotes because...
Well, yeah, it's
a scoring mechanic, not a...
It's a scoring mechanic, but they call it major and minor power factor. But the major gives you a more beneficial score when you hit less optimal areas. So when you're running a higher powered gun, we'll just say, to simplify it, you can go faster and be less accurate and still score really well.
That's the game.
I don't like the game.
That's the part of the game I'm not crazy about.
I don't like the game.
Because the idea is that the more powerful impacting round would be essentially more effective on a less lethal zone.
But before we denigrate the sport because it's lacking a few things, I want to make it really clear what I think in particular in Ed's case only USPSA could have done, or Steel Challenge more specifically. You know, Jeff has even mentioned this in some classes, but it's been less connected to the coursework. You know, he'll say something like, well, how do you run fast? You've got to run fast.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not even like Miyagi worthy in its simplicity. It's just like, hey, asshole, it's reps. It's getting out there. It's making your legs just do whatever you can. You're not running a race. Just figure out how fast you can move.
Fair enough. And if you're doing any reps at all to get good, and
probably worth.
I am not saying you don't do reps, sir. You do more reps than anybody I know, really.
Yes. Yeah.
My concern is, are the reps for the game, or are they for defense, or your why?
Both.
You know,
both.
So your why was a little muted. Yours a little bit of defense. Mine defense. Like I don't care about the game at all. Like
right.
Zero. I know.
Zero care about the game. And it's not like I don't. It's not like I don't understand the value of the game. The game's great, and if it makes you better, Ed, great. And if you encourage other people to get great, even better, great. You know,
it's literally the difference in competing in any sport. Anybody can go out and practice it. You can go to the studio, compete with roll with BJJ guys and learn something, right?
I'm just worried.
And not compete.
I'm just worried. Like if I were to start doing competitive shooting, and I were to buy, to me, race guns as an example, because I started thinking.
I don't run a race gun, by the way.
Well, just hold on.
Yeah.
When I was very first getting started, I didn't know anything about guns. I was like just trying to figure it out, and listening to anybody on the internet who has anything loudly to say. Yeah. And it's just like you had to flare mag well, and you got to have more weight here, and all this stuff, right?
Yep.
So I bought what I thought was going to be a obvious winner, right? This is the thing, right? Without getting into too much specifics, what I found was, if anything, it manufactured new interesting malfunctions into the gun. It actually created things that are very rare. You would never normally, like I was able to crack the whole center mass of the magwell by virtue of the way the flared magwell worked. Long story short, that was a short-lived experiment.
Yeah.
And I learned to kind of like, okay, there's a little bit more of a rigor to what we're talking about. It's not just,
A hack is a hack. And this is what I want to like build on that, but tell everybody. It might sound like with this part of the program that what we're saying is you gain a lot of really beneficial things once you hit this mystical level of proficiency. and maybe that means competing and all things like. I want to get like really obvious that like.
Hold on. Let me just say one thing real quick. This is very similar if you like Formula One, which I know you guys have both been to my Formula One parties.
Yeah, they're great.
So it's similar to a Formula One car.
Very much so.
That thing can go around the track super fast.
Designed to do that.
It could not handle a road trip.
Right.
And that is my worry. Like if I get too specialized and I get some race gun that's all weirdly, I have to hold it in this weird way, but it's perfect. It's
let's say the race gun is for the sport. Right? Truly is. But you gotta realize that, and this again for the benefit of some who don't understand this, the sport is broken into many different divisions, just like a lot of other sports. And these race guns that we keep referring to are usually called the open division. So you could also call that maybe the unlimited division. Yep. So here you've got F1 guns that are all
NASCAR.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Versus your Supra that you purchased.
Bingo. And racing some guy on the street at a red light.
Which is what most people have. They have the Supra.
Well, the carry optics is one of the most popular divisions in both the sports that I shoot. And carry optics loosely is...
That's a modded Supra.
No, it's actually generally what we would call a production gun with a red dot on it.
Again, modded.
I think it allows for things. And if you want to be in the top of carry optics, you are definitely running a not stock.
But also, you can't modify it extremely.
Yeah, it's not the most extreme, but you can't be at the top of the game without maximizing your.
You can put some efficiencies into it. Yeah. So
Well, let's.
If you want to drift your car, you want to put a few.
There's a
mods
couple of
on
things.
it. Yeah, sure.
You don't want to do it on the highway tires.
Naturally. But let me get back to one thing. Just one thing that I don't think either of you appreciate. And it is beneficial to know. And that is, you mentioned earlier about me going too fast. And this isn't a defense. I think you have a point. It's more that when you learn to go really, really fast and be effective, time slows down. Your brain becomes capable of processing the actions you're doing at a much higher speed. So when I draw...
Ed, no. Because when you slow down, you get amazing. When we
right, but I'm pushing myself when you see that. I'm teaching myself to go harder and faster.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You guys are in
when I slow down to 1.2 second draws,
no,
I feel like it's slow.
But then you're more accurate.
I am more accurate.
Way more accurate.
Way more.
You're crushing it. You're killing all of us.
Right, but you're used the best to not be able to do that unless it was 1.5.
Like I would kill you any day of the week when you and I got started. That's
probably coming in at a higher aptitude than us. Yeah.
Well, I don't even know if that's true.
No, I think from the I mean,
I remember you were much higher than me in the classes.
But now, Ed, you're moving at a degree where you're failing in ways that are like you're guaranteed to win if you slow down just slightly.
Of course.
So the question is, I think, and let me get to the heart of the matter.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
my
that's
question
my
is,
one complaint.
If
it's
he knows,
a minor nit, by the way.
Yeah, but when you see me sometimes, what I'm trying to do is train, like I'm lifting more weight.
Yeah, this is his max rep.
So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get to a sub 1 draw, right? I can do it, but where I can always hit sub 1. Always.
I mean, you're basically throwing the gun.
And then when you say slow down and 100% of the time accurately hit in 1.1 seconds, that's. And I couldn't do that. 1.1 used to be like impossible for me to even do.
And how
when I draw sometimes and I fire, I actually feel myself go. Oh, that was slow, right? And I felt myself slow down and aim, and I looked down at my timer and it's 1.18 seconds.
The most important value about competing
is
the finding your limit. And this is true, I think, of any competitor. Ed can slow down now. Ed does know it's slow, and fast look like, and accurate and inaccurate looks like.
Did it in the Bravo standard.
He did. And so as a result,
intentionally or after?
To be accurate, because it required me to be very accurate.
Yes.
The wheels came off and dial it back.
Okay, so the wheels came off and then you made the conscious decision.
No, incorrect. That was the last rep that we did was with his gun. Prior to that, I was like, we have a Bravo standard. I was shooting just below.
He was trying to get the fastest time and meet the standard, which
And
means
meet the standard.
80%, not 100%. He knows he could shoot 100% at 3 or 4 seconds longer. The
But I was
question
shooting.
can you?
I was shooting into the 90s, and
You were in the 80s at 8.
We don't.
In the 90s at 9.
seconds.
And
We don't
10.
need to. You don't need to be
Yeah.
specific about the
But-
particular drill.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, were you intentional or was it? I
was trying to use.
I messed up. I should.
No, I was trying to use the time that was allotted to me
Okay.
to be as effective as I could with the time allotted.
It's counterintuitive. If you drive really fast, but you don't know if you finish the course until you finish the course, how do you know if you're driving fast enough? Mm-hmm. But if you go off the road
Right.
and you hit a barrier, you know you need to slow down.
Yeah.
But if you just drive fast enough to get around the corners, you'll never know how fast you can go. I mean, he has to attempt a failure point to understand how slow he does need to go. In other words, effective is only the result of knowing actually how fast he's capable of getting out of the holster or breaking a shot.
I'd say,
and this is
yeah.
where competing and the skill sets there really is the only curriculum. Now, I will say only in quotes because Jeff actually taught us all 3 of this in the last class we took at that 3-level pistol course, right?
That's level 1. I heard.
Which apparently is level 1. There's 4 more after that. Just, anyway,
yeah, whatever. I don't try to compute any of that anymore.
right? But I think what the concern is valid. Have you put an emphasis on gear and skills that may hurt a defensive posture?
Maybe.
The only difference between yes and no on that question is, do you know your limits? So if you find that in a course or you find it from USPSA, as long as you find it, that's the lesson.
But even the guys who are way beyond me in USPSA with their open race guns that are just amazing, right? You throw a regular gun into their hand, they're way more effective than anybody else I know.
Yeah,
All
sure.
else being
Right.
equal.
So I there's a high degree of translation.
Okay.
It's quite high.
I'm my major concern is getting worse by getting better.
I don't think that would happen.
Okay.
As long as you came back to the fact that it's a perishable skill, are you training against your self-defense posture? Are you using gear that is realistically going to be employed? I mean, why I go to more courses than compete is every course I've gone to, I am so fucking humbled. I went to a rifle course a couple of years ago and I looked like a proper ass. I'm the guy, and I look, and this is in retrospect, right? I show up with the camo painted gun because that's what I did over the pandemic, and it's got all the bells and whistles. It's gram worthy, like it's Reddit gold, and I suck up this class because the gun's malfunctioning like crazy. Because the night before, I decided I needed 5 new things to make me like
that much better.
And that was ego. That was hubris. I was essentially, I didn't believe in myself. So I switched up the gear. But what I did learn is that was a mistake. But I also learned 5 other lessons about, when I'm in a hot, humid environment, it's really hard to discriminate targets with smoke. When I'm doing that at night with a white light, oh shit, I can't see anything. I learned so much by failing. The question is, how fast can you fail to learn more? And that's what I think is interesting about competing. Is you do get a little bit more of that data. It's still hermetically sealed, but it might help you learn some things.
So one thing I've noticed, specifically about you, Ed, and maybe even about you, I have seen an incredible increase in your self-esteem. In the very short time we've known each other, 4 or 5 years or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
It's not been that long.
Mm-hmm.
Between when I met you, you seemed like you really wanted everyone to like you and talk to you and blah, blah, blah. And now you're just walking around confident.
Interesting.
I don't exactly know why it is, but I love it. Because I always saw what you are now in you. And so for me, it feels a little strange to like watch your metamorphosis. I'm like, I always liked Ed. He was always a great guy. He was always not great at shooting.
No, definitely not.
But great in every other aspect of your life. There's only this one thing that I can really point to that is different. It's just this one thing.
Interesting observation.
There's been some other peripheral things that I've changed in my persona.
Okay.
But I do believe in self-improvement always, right? Just not just firearms. One of them is caring less about a lot of things.
But where did that come from, Ed?
You want? Well, honestly, the firearms is probably a component of it, right?
I think he's proving your point.
Well, some of it is self-confidence for sure. That comes from being able to be self-empowered, right?
Yeah, it's empowerment.
But it's self-empowerment, right? Knowing that you can go anywhere, and it doesn't mean you will be okay, but your odds are way better, right? And I am a very strong advocate of EDC carry, meaning everyday carry. Means all the time, except for when you're not able to or you shouldn't, because you just don't know, right? You don't know when a threat will present itself, but knowing that if you had to regrettably use deadly force, knowing that the odds of you coming out on top of that are significantly better is very empowering, right? And knowing that you can protect others, right? Your friends and family who haven't dedicated their time to those things, but knowing that if you're present, you would be able to affect that outcome. And I just think that's really great. But I also learned, I read a book. I'm not gonna lie, it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Okay. And I mean, the key takeaways from that book, I found it was very easy to read. I highly encourage people to read it. My key takeaways from that were, the world wants you to give a fuck about everything. There's like a billion agendas being thrust at you all the time, and it's overwhelming. And I'm the kind of guy who is very susceptible to giving a fuck about everything. And by learning to just pick a few things, made me care a lot less about a lot of things. And so some of that self-confidence equation that you're talking about really was me just not caring anymore.
I think this journey of self-improvement, and back to your question on which combat sport, why anything, I think if you pick up anything and it makes you more capable, and you feel that, and you feel that in your life, you've done two things. You've failed at it first, and you've spent a lot of time thinking about it. The end result of that over time is undeniably empowerment, because you won't ever go back there. You won't ever return to that previous state. And if that has like an outward benefit, and you're saying we're reflecting it or exuding it, or there's something like that out there, I think with Ed, I also agree with that. I think your assessment is 100% right on. Ed is not a different person than the Ed I knew before. Ed's
it's just
the
a confident
same
version.
And Ed I think was confident then, but it's when you leave that point where you've been the student long enough, and you really feel like embraced by your knowledge, and you walk out into the world without the question that was nagging you before. Call it confident. I mean, whatever. It's, but I love that effect. I really do. It doesn't matter how you get it. I got it when I learned to fly. That was the first thing I did in my life that I did. That wasn't an expectation someone else did for me. And when you land solo for the first time, you have to do, that's a binary outcome. So when you do that, if you didn't have that innate ability that I can arrive at something that I manifested, you do after that. And I always tell people, if you can do
binary,
one thing,
but I think you could come in on one wheel.
Oh yeah, I can wing it. I mean, there's a spectrum. But let's say if I don't, there's a lot of repercussions financially and otherwise that I may not want to experience. Shooting's kind of the same thing.
All right.
Well, Yeah.
So I personally really enjoy watching my friends grow, and where I've seen you grow, not just in technical ability, but in personality and just in every way. It's been.
Thank you. It's extremely flattering.
I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass.
I hope it's him. I hope it's not directed at me because I don't know if I've demonstrated all this stuff that you're talking about. But
well, I think you came, as you said, with your confidence was before, so you kind of already were in that realm. You've already had done a hard thing, a very hard thing.
Fair enough.
And this might have been your really hard thing, your one really hard thing.
It really, really was. Because it's funny that you brought that up, because I've always felt that most things in my life have come very natural. I'm blessed, right, to have, good coordination and a body that works and a mind that works well enough to pretty much whatever I want to do, I could just succeed at it if I applied myself. Guns did not want to cooperate, right? And I had to beat the hell out of myself and spend a fortune doing it to get where I am. And
but I'll say, like, his example for me also gave me a lot of hope. Like,
yeah, me too.
At knowing,
me too.
It's not knowing that Ed sucked, but that Ed and I shared the same challenge, and it wasn't deterring it. And so maybe, just maybe, I'm doing a worthwhile thing.
You are.
And so thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And you are a very good shooter as well.
Absolutely he is.
You are a very,
I think
very
so.
good shooter.
I tried really hard to be that. Achieve something.
I mean, of the three of us, you might even be of Jeff's caliber, maybe even the best.
Don't put that in my head, man. I mean, until I hear Jeff say it, I won't believe it. But
well,
there you go.
But I watched.
Gotta have Jeff say that.
I watched the three of us shoot most recently. Granted, we had different setups and different things and different technical problems, which I thought was it's actually worth talking about this.
Okay.
So you and both of you guys had optics problems. You both use optics. Mm-hmm. I do not. I shoot only irons with pistols.
Sucker.
he
And
just likes a stick shift. That's honest.
And, I mean, truth.
And you were shooting to the right. You were shooting to the left. I was shooting to the left.
Mm-hmm.
We all had malfunctions.
Yes.
All three of us.
Yes.
Technical malfunctions, not shooter error.
No, definitely not.
And that is super rare. And also, we all had it, which is amazing. And yet we were all shooting extremely well given the situation.
Yeah.
I was 8 inches off center at 25 yards. I mean, 8 inches off.
Let's just go
That's
to
how
Einstein,
badly
man.
my sights
Let's go to
were.
Einstein. It's all relative, space and time. All those shots together is the most important thing. Where they were on a different fixed reference point in time.
Oh my gosh.
That's existential
funny.
for you.
But yeah.
To me, that's when I saw you. When I saw your target, I looked over a lot at that. I was kind of envious because I was like, "Fuck, this guy's consistent." And that's the hardest thing I grapple with most of the time is I can shoot pretty damn good sometimes. Can I just make it all the time, please? And I really appreciate people I see in classes like that. Like where the hits hit on the paper is Jeff's problem. But are they kind of all in the same place? Because then it's
one
very
problem to
solvable
solve.
problem.
Yeah, it's one problem to
okay,
solve.
let's shift your front sight post over where it should be.
It was the back side post, actually.
I mean,
because I focus on the front side post.
But so here's a good example. I went and shot with these guys 2 weeks ago. I had a really good stage. I was about 10 seconds off the fastest guys, which sounds like an eternity in shooting, but when you factor in almost 40 rounds, it's not too bad. Mm-hmm. It's pretty damn good.
So my failure, my big thing, other than mechanical, is my speed. So you're the other end. You're maybe too fast. I'm too slow. I need to go faster. So we're all learning things as we go.
This is it,
of course.
And so,
but I think this is worth talking about technology here.
Yes.
This is where we nerded out early in our career, right? All of us.
Yeah.
Don't lie.
100%.
100%.
So let's talk. First of all, what gun would you recommend these days?
I thought about this before I came in today. I have a great answer.
For what
Go ahead.
application?
Oh, good question. He answers with a question.
Answer. I love that. Okay, we're talking about pistols for now and
Carry.
EDC.
EDC. So I will admit to a bias. I'm a big fan of Sig Sauer's firearms, but it's not necessarily for the reasons you'd think. I think they're really good at engaging their consumer market. I think they're really good at evolving their firearms, and they make a really quality firearm. But beyond that, right? So those are like some of the things that attract me to the company itself. The firearms, though, you know, a lot of people have heard of this gun. It's the P365, which has essentially it solved some of the challenges in very small firearms, which are very concealable firearms, and also more practical to carry because, as we all learned from Jeff, if you carry a gun that's very uncomfortable or not correctly on your body, you won't carry it. So one of the key solutions to everyday carry is to carry something you actually will carry, right? Every day. And the P365...
That's what EDC means, everyday
carry. That's right. So the 365 solved a lot of problems. I won't go into the litany of the problems that it solved, but it has opened up, and a lot of the industry has followed it, right? With similar ideas and concepts. They were groundbreakers in this, and now there's the 365 and the XL and the XL Macro and then like 19 other varieties. But it's also a gun that's highly modular and can be parts can be swapped out very easily, so you can actually have a lot of different parts for different applications. So you got a great company that solves a lot of problems, makes it very carryable. Quality and modularity makes it a big win for me.
For all of you that have a SIG in your shopping cart right now, I'm going to tell you everything he said is correct, but you're not there. You need to go buy a Glock 19 to find all of the problems
or 17
to find all of the problems that 365 will solve for you eventually. So, and I say that because you're not shooting enough right now to appreciate and understand what the 365 is solving for you. So what you need is the cheapest way to get the most ammo to shoot the most and train the most. And generally speaking, all else being equal, a Glock 19 will be in any store that you go into and has 40 years of doing the job. And eventually you will sell that and get a P365.
I would agree, except that I just have so I did the vast majority of my training with Jeff.
Yep.
With a Glock 19.
Gold barrel too. He was fancy.
Yeah. It was a little bit Gucci, but the point, I'm not a huge supporter of Glock anymore.
Neither am I.
Primarily for one reason is that and this is just my personal gripe on their branding, is that they use the word perfection. And to me, if I said I'm Bonawitz perfection, would I evolve? Perfection. Would I evolve? would I modify my approach to things, or would I say that I'm done? Right?
Yeah.
And my issue with Glock is that it doesn't seem to be evolving with the times and with the needs of the firearm community, and instead considers itself to be perfection.
Okay, so I think at this point it's probably worth talking about sight selection, because this is it seems like a friendly rivalry between us in a fun way.
Yeah, of course,
absolutely.
And so, okay, we have red dots, we have prisms, we have
my favorite.
straight old irons. Like what are we doing?
Fiber optic.
What are we running?
Fiber optic irons you could run too.
Yeah, what are we
just pistol?
Running? For now, let's talk about pistol.
It's a complicated question for me because I don't like running red dots. I had some specific competitive problems with my gear a couple weeks ago that I've just discovered.
And I've also seen it.
Let's just say that my OEM equipment here is the problem I'm working around.
Here being your eyes.
My eyes. My right eye specifically. My astigmatism is so bad. Most red dots are non-functional for me on rifles. And So I have very limited options. So when we were training with Jeff on irons, because God knows he wouldn't let a red dot in.
Well, he wouldn't let it. He would just
mean,
make fun of you all day long.
For a while, he wouldn't. Really.
Yeah, in 2017 and 2018, there's irons or nothing. But I tried. You know, I went through the journey that you went on, and Ed was on too. We were all there, and what I could not get past was I'm trying so hard to get on target. I'm spending so much time looking for what's supposed to look good, and I'm burning seconds. So I'm slow. I'm not accurate. I mean, I'm not going to say that I scored so badly in Jeff's classes because I didn't have a red dot then, but I can tell you if I did, I would have scored better. And that's me. That's my biology at this point. It's not like a real thing. So if you're watching this, like, oh, I can level up. Maybe, but if you have perfectly good eyesight or even pretty okay eyesight, the only thing the red dot might do for you is make it easier to keep your focus on the target and not the sights, which is really hard for new shooters to like bend their head around when they're not using red dots. But the fact is, every sight system out there for perfect eyes is good enough. And the rest is you. So,
yeah. No, that's good
think?
insight. Well, in my personal mission or my personal journey, I guess with this was, I was unaware at the time that I was learning, and I still stand by my word. I was awful with a lot of bad habits and things, right? But with irons,
Ed, I will affirm.
Yeah, you will.
You were not.
I was
a good
terrible
shooter at the time.
I wasn't at
the time.
Right. No, and I don't feel any shame in that. Yeah. But but I didn't know that at the same time, my vision. For those who are like looking at the camera, you can see I got some darkness over here on the side of my face. I've had multiple surgeries related to my left eye. I had an eye injury as a baby that apparently led to a premature cataract, rather severe one, where ironically with shooting, I actually discovered I had the cataract because when I looked at a red dot with my left, because I used to shoot left-handed. I am a lefty, and
was a lefty.
Well, I still am a lefty, but for shooting, I'm a righty.
You said you were a lefty.
Yeah, well, I'm both, I guess. But either way, I learned and fired with Jeff mostly left-handed. And when I went to do one of his rifle classes and I saw a red dot, it was like 19 dots. And so he ultimately encouraged me to try it right-handed, and I discovered that I was really good right-handed because my eye had actually shifted to right eye dominant, and I'm a lefty, and so we're almost all ambidextrous anyway, but whatever. The point is, with dots, was that, with irons, I was apparently having vision problems at the same time. So when I would focus, and for those who again don't know, when you're using iron sights or just sights, right? Traditional sights, you're really supposed to be sight focused, meaning that your eyes are focused on lining up the sights. So you're looking at something very close in, and then you're basically putting the target on, behind those sights and firing at it. So it's hard to be when your vision is
and not looking at a target.
Right, and not looking at the target, right. So, because you can't focus on both.
Right.
It's really hard, when you're older, because it's harder to focus close in, right? So, as you become, I think it's the word myopic, is that right? Mm-hmm. It's harder to see sights. So, for older beginners, I'd just recommend dots right off the bat, right? But with the irons, again, I was experiencing these problems where apparently I couldn't really see either very well, right? But when I went to dots, it was just like night and day.
For me, it was the biggest thing the biggest aid it provided was confidence that I'm on target. Mm-hmm. So what I could do was stop worrying about where my sights were and get onto that trigger press. So it took out a really big component of challenge for me and a hurdle that then was cascading in the rest of my shooting. So the cascade was, okay, the sights are moving. I'm not there. Okay, well, my triggers. Oh, gosh, I'm right there. Bang. And so I'm rushing the trigger because my sight picture is constant garbage. And okay, so what happens when you have an adequate sight picture? You're not having to focus at all. You're just there. And then you gain an appreciation and a trust for where that sight picture is. Oh shit. All of a sudden you're like 5 seconds faster because you can just execute. So you haven't gotten better, but what you have done is gotten out of your head. And you're now mechanically working the gun instead of worrying about your sight picture. The best sight is the one you never have to look through because your gun is exactly where it needs to be. And if we had perfect proprioception, we would just point our finger out there on the target and that would be where the bullet lands. Everything else that goes into it is deteriorating the shot. And if you graph that over time, the longer it takes for you to break the shot, the worse the shot's going to land. So that first best sight picture, right?
I would agree with that.
And so how do you somehow get the time hack? Well, again, this goes into, physiology and a lot of the things that are unique to the shooter. But generally speaking, all else being equal, once you understand how the red dot system works, and if it works for your eyes, what you're not having to figure out is focal plane changes between target fixation and sights, which equals less time.
So that's great points. But to give you a direct answer, I would say my recommendation for the average shooter, right, with different applications based on age and vision and things like that, would be to learn on iron sights first.
Wouldn't hurt.
Right? It's kind of loosely like the manual and the automatic, right? Knowing how to shoot iron sights. It's also, so red dots are wonderful, and I'm a huge supporter of them. However, they come with a lot of liabilities, right? They can fail, right? They can break and they can also have dead batteries.
This is exactly my problem.
Right? But more than that, is that you might not even have them zeroed correctly.
It's one more thing.
You're literally saying this. You're singing my song.
Yeah.
This is my concern. Batteries, blood, rain, random breakage because they're kind of big, clunky pieces of glass that could easily get caught on things. The battery being dead, being out of sight alignment. Like these are all just things that are very likely to happen in a real combat situation.
Huge liabilities.
And yet, when we were actually shooting, I had the same problem. My back sights
which is hilarious.
Are often, so clearly, I've got some humility.
Every sighting system has.
I am not
its limitations.
Coming to you with like this is the answer,
right.
But I still believe for the application of actual self-defense for me,
for you,
in a situation where I really have absolutely no idea what's going to happen, and I need to just get rounds on target, and I don't really have time to deal with an optic that I have to shake it to turn it on, or I have to click a button, or there's a thing that has to happen, or you have to remember that this one's got a slight parallax on it or whatever. I just rather not have any of those things going through my head in the moment when I have to pull a gun and use it.
I think you're right to think about that, but we have a lot of limitations. So you've overcome a lot of actual limitations in being able to shoot as well as you can and do. So why not get over those additional experiences? I think the only counter argument I'll offer to it, because nothing empirically is wrong with that argument.
Sure.
But it's kind of arguing a negative. So if I could tell you that there was a way to get around all of those things, and that was training, would you appreciate the aid? And that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day.
So for rifles, I'm on board. I'm on board.
Because otherwise you are handicapping.
Yeah. I'm on board because for several reasons. One, I think trying to deal with traditional irons and at real range, you can't even see the target. You just can't see it.
That's true.
Because if you're
not enough data, you're getting
at 25 yards and in, I believe you can see the target. Like my eyes can see the sights and the target at the same time. I am looking at the sights.
You're blessed.
I was going to say
there's some blurriness.
Love you, buddy.
I'm actually in agreement with you on this. I'm in agreement with you on this one. But with if you're like 50 yards, 100 yards out, forget it.
Yeah,
like
right.
absolutely not
I
going to
mean,
work.
it's,
For me,
again,
for my
it's still
eyes.
possible, but you're right. So here's the funny thing, and this is just backing your point up. At 50 yards with an astigmatism and red dot, I cannot differentiate the target because the dot dispersion in the optic obscures it. So even with the thing, I can't use the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the very
At
personal
50
part
yards,
of
why are you engaging? Is my question. You should just be
inside.
retreating.
Come on. Just defeat the threat. Man.
Don't be macho.
Don't be shy.
50 yards,
defeat the
don't
threat.
disengage, right?
I mean, I'm talking about rifle here.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it's a push on the pistol, but
Still kind of
yeah.
making my point. 50 yards, just disengage, but whatever.
But but think of this. This is 50 yards with a rifle,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's
I mean, of all the things you can mount on top of a very accurate piece of equipment that can get you out to hundreds or thousands of yards, right? You now can't see the target at 50. That's
Right.
kind of fucked up, right? A little
Yeah.
bit. So this comes back to it doesn't matter.
right.
It only matters what you can do with the
Now,
thing.
if the apocalypse happens and my batteries die because of thermonuclear, blah, blah, whatever,
Prison
the hell,
baby.
or whatever.
Still working.
Something, maybe, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
It's etched.
But what definitely
Suckers.
works is iron. Like,
Yeah, I
what
agree.
works in the rain and the snow and blood and whatever and all this garbage and just wipe it off and you're...
I could just point it at you.
You
I mean,
know,
irons is
yeah.
still, again, it's a sighting system, meaning what we're overcoming is our inability to reference the muzzle with the target.
what I would recommend for you, because of your very strong opinion in regards to irons, but you also recognize that
in self-defense.
I understand in
That's-
self-defense,
That's
but
only
also
number one.
but well, I know that's your primary like ethos
That's the
relative
why.
to firearms, but but you also recognize there are benefits to a red dot. Would be to run them where they coincide, right? Where you have maybe like silencer, height, sights,
Suppressor, come on, Ed.
silencer,
So
suppressor.
I started
whatever.
out
I don't
with this
care.
suppressor height sights in my 19.
I knew what you were
with my
saying. I'm
first
just
red
being an
dot.
ass.
I know you are, but the idea being that essentially, and this is for the benefit of people who we keep referring to red dots, and a lot of people think that means lasers.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
right?
Not that.
So a red dot really is a small light emitter that shines onto a pane of glass, which is mounted with like a metal container. So think of it as like you're looking through a small window on top of the gun that has a dot that is projected onto it that you can then see. So you're looking through the glass with a like a holographic, essentially red dot that would then sit on top of the target that you're aiming at, and then you would fire to hit it. And you need to have that sight aligned correctly so that it goes where it's supposed to. But in the situation of what I suggested to you, you would also then, in addition to that, have
A backup.
essentially what you'd think of as traditional sights that are a little taller than average that would also line up. So when you look down through that pane of glass, you see the sights, they line up with the front sight, and there just happens to also be a red dot right there in the same place.
Co-witness.
Co-witness.
Have
That's
you run
exactly the word
fibers?
I was getting to, which is co-witness. They call that co-witness.
Have you run fibers or have you just run like X-rays?
I have run almost every type of optic I can think of at some point in the trajectory that you were talking
But I
about.
mean the irons, like your irons.
Yeah,
have
yeah, I
you,
have all
So,
But see-
kinds.
so you know the difference
All-
between like a real thin front sight post that you're.
I actually
have-
prefer the very thin front
fiber
sight
optic.
and an almost completely muted back
Yes.
because it really helps me get
Acquire.
acquire.
Yeah.
Right.
So like a Dawson sight.
yeah. So I think
Dawson for the win.
I think actually mine are default Sig 365 sights.
X-rays.
The X-ray 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just nice, like a kind of blacked out almost on the
Uh-huh.
back.
Uh-huh.
Nice
Line it
bright. I think they're green in the front, and
Well, those if they're the default SIGs, and those are the ones using tritium,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. True. Those are not fibers.
they're not fibers, they're tritium.
It's true, and I really like the there's some nuances to that kind of training for that sight picture, meaning holding over the sight versus lining up the bottom dot like on Glock sights. So
I am not a big fan of Glock stock sights. Those
no.
they're plastic, guys. Get rid of them. First thing, first day, first hour.
I agree. But I do think that like a co-witness situation would be a good way for you to basically get the benefits of both without having to sacrifice
the standard that you're holding yourself.
I think I do.
So I really appreciate the diligence with which you select your environment. It's really important in the defensive mindset. I have something very similar. I'm very religious about. I have 2 calibers. Sorry, three now. This was when Ned and I first started. I told him my crazy theory. I'm like, there's too many calibers.
True that.
There's like you will see the most ridiculous flame wars on the internet around 9mm versus 45. The answer is pick one.
Just pick one.
Just pick one. I don't care. If you have a reason, fine. Fact is, they will both kill somebody else. So will a 22 if you really have to get down to it. So at the end of the day,
very easily,
just pick one. Pick one for your reasons. But after that, you know what you shouldn't do is go buy 10 of everything else and stock your safe full of a bunch of one-hit wonder toys because they solve a niche internet argument on something. And so I hold myself to 9mm, 223, and 300 blackout. And 300 blackout is the only notable exception. But I make that exception now because it is in enough quantity. But the rationale, like your iron sight, my why for that is I will never have to worry about ammo availability. I will never buy a thing that I can't fire.
It's true.
It's something that sits in the safe that feels cool, looks cool, has some sex appeal, but really requires first world to make bang. No, sorry, I can't do it. And that's my why. Like my why is I have to be able to reach for anything in there, and anybody else in my household has to be able to reach for anything in there and employ it without having to think about what mag to put in,
it's true,
what ammo's there, what it's going to do. And simplicity has a value of its own. And in particular in firearms in the industry, you can spend so much money chasing
the perfect bullet.
The perfect build, the perfect gas length on your AR.
But what I like about your principle, and I support it, but I think you should add to that. Just you selected the right choices is cost, right?
100.
Because the rounds he's mentioned, for those who don't know, are among the most common calibers in the world,
therefore the cheapest,
and therefore most abundant, produced in the largest amounts, and therefore the cheapest, and also the most available, right? So I would just be careful about choosing rounds, like choosing a round for your primary one that's going to be very expensive, which is then going to deter your ability to train. Good example, the 380 ACP, right?
Yes.
It's a very popular selection amongst what I would consider to be novice firearms people who think that they need a lighter caliber round that still falls inside the defensive category, but they cost way, way, way more, and the benefits are very nominal from a recoil perspective, which is usually why people side with the 380 ACP.
And well, there was a small time frame when the little tiny micro pocket pistols came out, were in mostly 380,
right,
and mostly for women.
Yes, they're mostly marketed to women,
which is ironic because they're harder to control.
Absolutely,
I agree.
And more expensive. I honestly, and I can tell you, from the competitive world perspective, I have seen all manner of women in the competitive sports, from big, tall, large, little petite girls. I mean, little petite people, and it doesn't matter. They can all shoot 9mm.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yes. Thank you. Like yes.
So my sort of advice to perhaps a petite woman or someone who's considering getting into the sport would be, don't worry about that. It's really a non-factor. Go with a common caliber that you're comfortable with that has a lot of firearm choices and selections, because finding the gun that's right for you is better than kind of finding the caliber that's right for you.
Bingo. And because you will find it. I mean, at the end of the day, you will find the right gun, and it just needs to be effective.
I mean, the FBI did a lot of research on this, and it was a mix of, obviously, they need a certain amount of penetration, yes, but they also needed certain amount of rounds on target. So 45s, you can only carry 10, 12, maybe total of 15 max if a very
More like
big,
7 + 1 in a 1911.
Yeah, usually 7 + 1 or 8 + 1. Like,
Yeah.
really just not that many rounds compared to a Glock 17, which is 17 + 1. I mean, that's a lot more rounds on target. They did some analysis. It was, I'm going to butcher this slightly, but let's say it was 1.5 rounds on average required to take down a target, and something like, I think it was like 8 rounds maybe, or 7 rounds or something like that, total required to get 1 round on target.
Oh, right.
Bingo. Yeah.
So you needed,
right.
I think something like 15, I think was the magic number to get at least 2 rounds on target to take down 1 target on average.
Yeah.
That's a lot of rounds down range.
A lot of level 0
just
shooters.
I was going to say level 0. Raise your hand.
So that's why they ended up with the 9mm as the standard, as opposed to 45, which is what they had before.
Well, it makes sense.
Let's face it. You could find any thread that's going to find any rationale why the government picked it. I mean, these are all things that are beyond the scope of the shooter to control and manage. So all you can do, in my personal opinion, whether it's I really wish I knew this person's name, because I'd love to give them credit for what they've accomplished. But very recently, a gentleman here in Austin, in Texas, qualified LTC shooting with his feet because he does not have arms.
That is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know about that.
Here's to the idea that gear is a consideration. It's not really the most important one.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to find what's going to work for you. And what we're telling you here, and what the sum total of this entire discussion is about, is it's a journey. And we're all going to find different things that we need. I have small hands. I need a smaller grip. Glock 17, Glock 19. Sorry. I'm glad it works for a lot of people, millions of people. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work as well.
Agreed.
But I've spent a lot of time finding what works better. And that's been my commitment. If you can't, for whatever reason, cost, time, you can't commit to it, the good news is there's some pretty basic options out for all things, whether it's sights, brand. And that's why I recommended what I did around the Glock was if you can just remember the name when you go into the store and you don't get sold by the guy on something you don't need.
Yeah.
If you can remember the name versus what the person in the YouTube video said about the dot that you needed on this because it was hot sex. Like, just shooting often, training often, getting better is the only thing that matters, because the rest is either limited by you or limited by something else about you, like your money or your time or something like that. So, I think the gear conversation is important, but it is a level 1 conversation, not a level 0 conversation, because the only way gear matters, is after you've gotten safe, after you've shown a minimum competency, and after this is something you care about investing your time and money in.
Okay, so Hollywood.
Woo!
Yes.
So Hollywood will have a perception of, and they will drive the perception, I think is the real problem, of what it's like to be a shooter, to shoot, what shooters are like.
And how loud guns are.
How beautiful.
What shooting is like.
Yeah, sure.
How easy it is, etc.
Certainly how easy.
So I would like to give you a chance to give your perception. How does Hollywood do us dirty?
The number 1. They teach everyone to put their finger on the trigger at all times while carrying the firearm. In every movie, except for the really good quality ones.
Yeah, they can't really seem to get over that too.
It's
old
the idea.
movies.
Everywhere you see is they're walking around with their finger on the trigger. And one of probably the most important rules in firearms that I teach whenever I assume they don't know them is you always keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to shoot. That includes even in competitive sports. You're not allowed to run around with your finger on the trigger at all. You get disqualified for that. So because it's ultimately the primary safety, right, aside of all others,
right?
It's the primary safety that prevents a negligent discharge of the firearm. So I think Hollywood teaches people And you see it almost every time a very ranked novice person, or, you know, I have a lot of friends who are foreigners and they come over and they want to shoot. The first thing that they instinctively do, even though I've told them not to, is they pick up the gun and they put their finger on the trigger. And that is the worst thing I think Hollywood does. There's a million other ones, but that's the worst.
I agree. I think the other is the presumption that you can do all these other things while you're trying to eliminate the target.
And like jumping and running and that kind of thing.
Rolling.
I mean, pick one. I mean, there are so many obstacles, and we learn this so quickly when we're training. There's so many obstacles to you getting the gun on target. You're sitting at a table. If I were to draw right now, what would I have to do? I got to defeat my cover. I got to get over the table. And then I might want to line up my shot so I don't hit anybody else. How long and effective is that going to take? The simple process of raising the gun to what kind of looks like from the third party perspective, your eye level alone burns seconds. And then when you start yanking the trigger, you can expect good things to happen. Productive things to happen is created a massive disservice. Again, everything that and I'm gonna throw video games in here in addition to the Hollywood component is, it's really easy when I just line up my mouse and bang on it. But thankfully
guns don't have recoil.
The guns don't have recoil. And also what I always try to explain when, like, if I don't want to get too far into the school shooting bullshit, but what I try to just simply rationalize for people about firing under pressure is the reason why we need guns everywhere is if someone tries to kill a bunch of people, it's a lot harder for them to do it when rounds are cracking past their head at supersonic speeds, or physically breaking their concentration and not allowing them the time to find easy targets and kill a lot of people. It's a mathematical equation. The more rounds you can employ on target in an effective way in the shortest possible time means you win. That doesn't mean volumetric spray and pray. What it means is effective employment. And frankly, it's a disservice by making all of this seem just so easy.
I would agree. That's great.
That's what I would say the biggest problem in Hollywood is. When you see some random little girl, little boy pick up a gun and they're like, bah, 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 and like 5 people die. It's like, wait, what? Like, how would that have... I mean, unless it was 100% luck, that's never going to happen. And also they're going to scare the crap out of themselves. Everyone's going to be deaf.
First shot's going to jump. The gun's going to probably jump out of that person's hand and fall.
I mean, there's so many things between them shooting the way that they showed in that video and actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take the video game. Moving your mouse to put a cursor over another pixel. It's so much harder to move weight in 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Move the muzzle of that rifle where you need it to, and then now go from target to target to target to target while impugning forces on it that are difficult to manage.
Plus the stressors.
Well, I told you, in the 80s when I used to do shooting guns games, I was a complete badass until I actually
you could do the behind
shotguns under stress of any kind. But that is probably the best point, right? One other point I'd make though would be, and it's a disservice to the firearms community more than anything else, is suppressors, and that they are super quiet. Right, this idea of the James Bond 22 that goes, and it's like a way to stealthily murder people all day long and get away with it, is very flawed. For those who don't know, suppressors, what they do is they reduce the sound to a level that makes it not damaging your ears. In some cases, it doesn't even do that.
I would say maybe 30% of the time it does that.
Right. It depends on the circumstances, but I think it's 140 decibels or 130 decibels is where you want to get it to. And 130 decibels is loud.
That's loud. That's twice as loud as any concert you've been to.
And if you're outside, If you hear 130 decibel shot outside, it's loud, but it's not painful. When you hear a 130 decibel inside, it's painful. It may not damage your hearing, but it is very
permanently
painful.
damage it.
That's right. And your ears may ring a little. But and even the best suppressors with the lowest, weakest calibers, you can, like with a 22 long rifle, it's a very small bullet with
and subsonic
and rounds that are not breaking the sound barrier. You can get to where even inside you don't need Hearing Pro and it's not that loud, but you could not conceal it. People, maybe if you're deep in a building somewhere, of course, but under any normal circumstance, people are going to hear it and they're going to go, "That's a gun being fired."
Yeah, pretty easily. And it's unique, guys. It's a unique sound, whether it's the loudest it can be and it's right next to your head, or it's half a mile away.
Yes.
It does not sound like anything else.
Well, people do mistake firecrackers in Texas all the time for guns, but under any kind of initiated sound, you'll know what it is.
It's not like someone slapping some shoes together or something. You're gonna know.
Yeah,
right.
You're gonna know. And if you have any kind of exposure, there's a very unique quality to it that is definitely not firecracker. So, but either way, I feel that does a disservice to the community because there's a lot of legislation and control around suppressors, and the worry is that they'll be used in some kind of inappropriate way to go on murderous sprees, and that's just simply a flawed idea.
We already have a lot of murderous sprees.
It doesn't, having those laws to negate those from commonality doesn't benefit society. It just hurts our ears.
Really. Even if you don't care about our ears, it doesn't make you safer.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make me as a shooter more lethal. Doesn't make you safer when they're gone.
No.
So what do you guys think of the firearms industry writ large? So there's a lot.
I love it. Hire me. Just kidding.
I think they should hire you, to be honest.
Whenever you guys are ready, I'm good.
That's my second career.
Yeah,
when I retire, I will definitely go into firearms.
I mean, honestly, I think both of you should actually move into that career, because when I look at the firearms industry, I see antiquated technology, antiquated way to market to a modern shooter.
That's why I like SIG. They're figuring it out.
I think SIG is maybe one of the few who has figured this out. Mm-hmm. There's this massive gap between we have inventory, you need inventory, and like, look, what are you looking for? You know, like, let's make this work for you. Oh, you having problems with your shooting? Like, let's get you into the right kind of training with our pistols in our way that will help you get better, like really better and provably better. And we're getting better together with our cadre and I don't know about you, but I go on a lot of websites and I'm like, this is the kind of website I would have designed 20 years ago.
Exactly.
I'm in human factors, so yes, I know precisely whether it's the switch on your wall or the website you built. I have opinions about it. So yes,
but you know what I mean.
I do.
You go there and you're like, how is this still the website you're hanging your hat on? Like your cousin designed this for you like 20 years ago, and you've not updated this thing. And I feel like the whole industry is sort of like that. You have a couple, and I mean a couple, like you guys, and like, you know, you run into them, of new enthusiasts who would love to help, but there's this old guard who's like very protective of the way things used to be, and there's like
government contracts.
Yeah, like we got to do things in a certain way, and it's like, no, you need a. It's sort of like yes, we have paper maps. Like, yeah, paper maps are kind of useful, I guess, if like I have no internet
limited
connection.
applications today.
Yeah. But we have this new thing, you know, it's like Google Maps or whatever, you know.
I have good news for you. The revolution won't be televised. It's I am so positive on this question. Like, in the short period of time that we've discussed tonight about all being involved in this thing, God, so much has changed for the better. Mm-hmm. I mean, just SIG's approach to product design and ergonomics.
Yeah.
For as one example, I'm not
The low
highlighting
tox
them as-
suppressors.
Is anyone here getting money from SIG? I need to know this right
Dude,
now.
I mean,
No, but
You're-
I am
I should be a
very, very
shareholder at
passionate
least.
about this company. I think they're doing a phenomenal job.
I mean, human factors. So you started off the question. Let's keep it there. Human factors.
Yeah.
Who is doing human-centered design? The first thing I tell people who say, I want to go buy a gun, what gun should I buy? I don't tell them the brand and I don't tell them the caliber and all that. I say, here's what you shouldn't do. When you go into the gun store, you're going to have 4 things out on a glass case. Please do not pick the one that feels good in your hand. Pick the one that you take into the range, shot, and you know works for your hand. That's the correct answer. It's not a brand. It is your unique ergonomics play such a big factor in your ability to be competent. Start with the right foot forward. And unfortunately, I can't evaluate that for you. And there's a lot of companies, I'm going to throw Walther under the bus. God, those P-Series Bond guns feel great in your right hand, only your right hand, unloaded, and not on a repeat shot. Stack those things together, and I don't want that anywhere near me. But they know how to sell a gun.
Right.
And unfortunately, that was where the industry came. They knew it was a low intellect buy with no discernibility, and they could take advantage of the buyer. Which is why Glock was so perfect, because they made it good enough,
Perfection.
but did nothing
Yeah.
to
perfection.
help the 20% that couldn't quite fit into their.
But you
mode
have
of
to
approach.
remember, it's a volume market.
It
Right?
is.
And so they're not trying to appeal to people like
Niche.
us.
Yeah.
Like they care about our sales because we're repeat and multiple buyers, but really the volume is at the level 0.
The distributor.
Right?
Zero.
Level
Sell it to
0.
Anybody.
You know, pandemic was a great opportunity for these guys. They sold out of every
And
crappy
everything
gun
sold.
they had.
Yes, exactly. It wasn't the good stuff. It was.
Did I tell you
everything.
the story of what happened in the pandemic at the range? Did I tell you my involvement in that thing?
I was
The
aware
pandemic
of
starting
the
it,
the
or-
line that was stretching out the building, and that they sold every gun.
So they were fully shut down during the pandemic. Fully shut
Yeah,
down.
that's right.
So me and a couple of guys made some phone calls and got the Attorney General to say that the gun range was one of the few carve-outs for public safety. And so we got
That's
Texas.
outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, it was cool.
We got Texas gun sellers, not the ranges, unfortunately, but the sellers open for business.
Yeah.
Right.
And we saw one of the greatest increases in gun ownership in Texas history because
amazing.
of that tiny little change. In
I
the
waited
law.
in those lines
That's
to
incredible.
get ammo and for other things, and I definitely saw people in those lines that I hadn't seen in any gun store before, and that's such a phenomenal thing.
One day after we started making phone calls, the floodgates were open.
That's amazing.
And that
It
was
was-
quick, because I mean that was
I know
already
it was
by
quick.
like March and
Because you know Grant was lamenting like this is
Yeah.
a really shitty situation. Like I
Yeah.
wish I could be open. I'm like, well, let's make that happen.
Right.
Me and a couple other guys made it happen.
outstanding.
Like that's, I think that a new shooter is actually a fairly dangerous person.
Yes.
Really, a really pretty
Yeah.
dangerous person.
Yeah.
Especially a panic buyer. I'm
Yep.
not a huge fan of the panic buy. But I also was pleased to find that a huge chunk of those people went and got their LTC.
True.
Right. Yes.
Huge chunk where they were like completely booked as soon as they were able to do that type of training again. Completely booked. Like people wanted it. Like
months.
right. Yeah. Yes.
You know, you're shifting into an area that's I'm passionate about, which like there's a lot of people who, and I'm not even talking about the pandemic buyers, but rather the people who don't know anything about guns, but have an opinion on them, right? And we're all entitled to have an opinion on them. But I have found, and I do, as you kind of suggested much earlier in this podcast, that, you know, I tend to run a little on the left side. I would say that that's true, right? I don't really like those kind of labels,
Yeah,
but
sure.
but I generally do. Obviously not when it comes to firearms, right? But I have a lot of friends who are like that, and
Right.
they know nothing about guns, but they have a very strong opinion about them, and so they're operating, in my opinion, from a point of extreme ignorance. right?
And do you do your work? Do you actually like try to educate them and bring them in?
That's exactly it, right? So I try to appeal, instead of trying to tell people that they're wrong, I try to appeal to the fact that they have a strong opinion, they're entitled to it, but wouldn't you like to be more informed, right? You know, you say that, you know, a semi-automatic gun is, you know, like a fully automatic gun. They don't know the difference, right? So I want them to understand the difference, because they're like, oh, we got to get rid of these semi-automatic firearms. You realize that's like virtually every firearm out there, except guns that were made like 100 years ago, right? So bringing them in, right? Saying, you know what, let's go to the range together. I consider myself to be what I call a firearms ambassador, right? I don't want to tell you what to think. I want to teach you what's true and let you form your own opinion. And I will tell you, in my own opinion, the people that I have taken to the range and given them a proper introduction with a proper mindset, I'm willing to bet 95% of those people walked away with, wow, they're not evil. They are dangerous, but they're to be respected. And I could do this, and I could own one, and I could be safe with them.
They being guns.
And why do I have to take it out of
Correct.
Ed's hands, who's doing the right things with it?
And I know that if I were to purchase a firearm and get the right training, that I can empower myself to my own self-defense and not have to rely, not any besmirchment on the police, but if there's a crime, there's a good chance they're not going to be there until after it's been perpetrated. So these people walk away with this idea that I can do this for myself and be safe, right?
I would say the response I typically get, I would say maybe 60% of the time, is I now know I shouldn't own a gun.
There's a lot of people who know that too.
Because of how the distance between where I'm at and where I need to be to safely operate. They're like,
that's the best.
I might even be a -1 at this point. I'm like so not even a 0, let alone a 1. Like I just did it. I shot my first round, maybe 5 rounds or something, maybe 10, but like that's it. And I would never feel comfortable coming in the range ever again without somebody like you helping me out. And I kind of like that response, because it's not coming completely out of fear. It's coming from knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I would say, let's add a comma to that. And because I know that, and because I know what you know, or I know that you care about it, I don't have an interest in taking away your gun.
That's exactly right. That they're not inherently evil.
That last bit. If they're not willing to take on the very important responsibility, I support that. I also want them to support my right to decide for myself to do that. That's it. It's very simple. And that's a very live and let live situation. Mm-hmm. I walk away not being a threat to them. They walk away not feeling threatened, and we don't impugn each other's ability to be a part of this society. I don't like absolutes under any circumstances, and with firearms, I've learned personally in my journey that there is none. It just doesn't exist. So how come that is not more of a common situation? And what I appreciate about Texas, and juxtaposing that with where I lived in California before that, was the only difference is this place with these approaches and these laws allows me to choose for myself versus someone making that decision. And I think everybody listening to this, regardless of their starting point or their current opinion, doesn't want to be told by somebody else what they can't do.
That's right.
If I can be responsible and safe, allow me to be. That's it.
That's a great point, Chris.
I don't need anything else from you. I don't want anything else. I don't want subjugation for someone who walks out of the range with that mindset. I don't need you to be on my side. I just don't need you to be against me. Right. That's it. And I want America to work that way in this topic, if only this topic. So there's a lot of good rationales behind it, but we can't even get to that part of the conversation sometimes. And that's my only hope and wish. But for the industry at large, I really do think we're at like a great place. if only because there's so many new people with diverse opinions and experiences now going on this journey that the rest of us started just a little bit before them. That's going to bring positive things for our society.
First of all, that was a phenomenal point. Really fascinating. The one thing I would say about the industry that I would like out of the industry, and it kind of counters 2A, right? Which is this idea that the Second Amendment is this unlimited right? And that this idea that, it can't be infringed and all of that. My opinion is that it doesn't prevent us from self-regulation, right?
I prefer the self part.
Right. I feel like any industry which believes that it's entitled to not be regulated is the most likely to be regulated.
Especially if they don't take ownership for that.
And I think that, and this is an awfully huge assumption on my part, so I apologize to the firearms industry if anyone hears it. But it is really that...
Rounds incoming.
Yeah, I know, right?
Shots fired.
But it's really just, if we collectively as a industry / community take increased responsibility for how firearms are sold, marketed, used, trained, whatever, right? Depicted, we allow for a better outcome. And self-ownership of that and self-regulation is what will ultimately deter ignorant regulation, which is what everyone doesn't want and what's happening to us and we're seeing happen across the country and various states.
And it's a disservice to those of you who believe you can and should remove guns from our hands, that your representatives are lying to you with misguided information that it's simply as simple as writing down some words on a piece of paper, that you can legislate good human behavior and that the tool somehow is the problem. I 100% align with that. And I think regardless of what you choose politically to believe, we have to understand that life just it's not that fucking simple. So
it's not.
At a minimum, let's just keep talking.
And we can never put Pandora back in the box.
We can't put Pandora in the box. Let's go to the range. Let's talk about it. Let's learn some things. Let's all get closer to something that appears like a page that we can read from. And let's just see what the hell happens. Mm-hmm. But don't go to your corner. I won't go to mine. And the upside for both of us is that we can live out our lives in hopefully a little bit more trust and respect for each other. I mean, what I have to do when I show up at the range is show up with respect for myself
and a bit of humility.
Of course.
At a minimum, if I want to improve and say all the things that I said earlier, which I do. So that has to be like a prerequisite. And that was what was such a great part about having that imposed upon me by Jeff's process was I got to the right
humility.
I got to the right
ego.
mindset quiz. Yeah, crush
completely
ego.
crushed.
And you have to come to the temple and sleep at the doors before you can be allowed entrance. And that's if you want to improve at this. But even if you don't want entrance, I think it's really important that you not bar people who do. And that goes for everything. We've tried experiments in this country with legislating morality and they have all failed. So, let's just check the ego. Like I said, let's go to the range. Let's take away what we take away from it. But I very much believe that, and I hold very crucial to my identity is that we both have to walk away with a point of view that allows the other to exist. And so that fatality, that fatalism that exists on both sides is unacceptable. I don't think the industry necessarily purports that. I really don't. But it's convenient tropes to kind of play to your audience, regardless of whatever you're trying to sell. Mm-hmm. And again, because we have so many new people in the industry who are now new shooters who are going through the journey, things are improving rapidly on almost every front. From product design, from ergonomics, from technology, because now there's enough money to scale those niches and those benefits and build it out. So if you were ever thinking Like I may not be able to be a good shooter, or I may not be able to do all the things that you guys have said because of money or time or something else. You're kind of, this is the best. There was no better time to get in except today.
And there's no age limit. I mean, one of my students
seriously
is 79 years old. And that is really cool. And is now just deciding to learn.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Gentlemen.
Yes.
I think we have to call it. So I actually want to continue this conversation. I don't think we got to where we need to go. So maybe we'll redo this. We'll do them another time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this was great.
Inshallah, God willing.
Yeah.
So before I do that, where can people find you or whatever if you want to be found? I don't know.
Sure. From a firearms perspective, I actually am not huge on social media, but I am on Instagram. My name is Seeking Peak. That's with 2 E's for the seek and EA for the peak.
On the gram.
On the gram.
On the gram, yeah.
On the gram.
And you can see some of the things that I do, and I don't get too fluffy, but it's a lot of like the things that I'm shooting, and kind of gives you an idea of what my skill level is like.
Great.
Well, despite being paid to do social media, I have no personal interest in being social. So if you want to know me, the best way you can find me is to come out to the range, Austin, and shoot with me. And, I'd love to. Let's do this IRL thing. And if you find me on social, I'm sorry, I don't have anything new and relevant to offer.
Well, Chris and Ed, thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.
Greatly appreciated. A lot of fun.
Yeah, absolute delight.